those restrictions. So there'll be a few people
played volleyball, was the co-captain of her cheer team, ran track, was the president of the student council, and a member of the FOR Club. Currently, she attends Covington High School, is a member of the freshman and JV volleyball teams, a JV cheerleader, a member of the powerlifting team, and a member of the Fellowship of Christian Athletes. In her spare time, she enjoys attending and volunteering at her church, the First Baptist Church of Covington. And without further ado, the pledge by a very talented young woman, Caroline Frederick.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Ms. Caroline.
Do you remain standing?
Mr. Balisaro.
Yes. Good evening, everyone. It's my privilege to announce from Pastor Morris St. Angelo. He has pastored New Beginnings Church of Slidell for over 20 years. He's the author of the book Grace Thoughts, a writer for the inspirational page of the Slidell Independent newspaper. He owns and operates Grace Radio, a local FM Slidell radio station. He serves as a chaplain for the St. Tammany Coroner's Office. Pastor Morris is the lead minister for the Slidell Minister Association that has united over 200 ministers from churches, ministries, government, business, and educational institutions. The Minister Association has created and signed a declaration of interdependence that declares the ministers' dedication to each other in unity of service to Jesus Christ, Slidell, Louisiana, in the kingdom of God. Thank you. Pastor Morris.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you inviting me here tonight, and I want to congratulate you on continuing a great tradition of beginning governmental work with prayer. Back in the early 1800s, Benjamin Franklin was at a meeting when they were trying to put together the Constitution. They just couldn't get it done. And he reminded that austere group that they had began each day of prayer with the Declaration of Independence with prayer. And I found a portion of a prayer, the very first prayer recorded in the Continental Congress in 1774. And I'd like to pray it and read that, a brief part of it, and then continue in prayer. It said, Almighty God, be present with us. Direct the counsel of this honorable assembly. Enable them to settle things on the best and surest foundation. And let truth and justice, religion and virtue prevail and flourish among the people. Preserve the health of their bodies and the wisdom of their minds, and shower down on them and all those that they represent such blessings as you see best for them in this world, and crown them with everlasting glory in the world to come. Father, we thank you. As your servant David said, we enter your gates with thanksgiving in our hearts, and we enter your courts with praise. And we do thank you for our community, for St. Tammany Parish, for all of our fellow citizens, for our government workers, for those who are elected officials who work diligently to serve us. I pray that all the blessings of the former prayers of our founding fathers would be upon this group. And as they meet together tonight to discuss the affairs of our community, I pray that divine wisdom would be on each of them, that they would have unusual knowledge and insight into the affairs that they deal with, and that they would bring truth and peace and your divine will for our community. Father, we know that you are with anyone who invites you into their presence. So we know that you're here with us tonight in our presence because you've been invited. And Father, we continue to ask you to watch over our community, this great St. Tammany Parish. And this is our prayer in the name of Jesus our Lord. Amen. Amen. Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Dean? Mr. Fitzgerald? Mr. Thompson? Mr. Toledano? Mr. Tanner? Mr. Belisario?
Here.
Mr. Lorino?
Here.
Mr. Groby? Mr. Canulet? Miss O'Brien? Mr. Stefanczyk? Mr. Bender? Miss Blanchard? Mr. Smith? You have a quorum.
Thank you, ma'am. Just some public information here for the meeting. Public comments, anybody wishing to speak on any ordinance or resolution or anything that we have, please put a card in. And public comments is a 3-minute time limit is established for each member of the public wishing to speak for or against an item that is on the agenda, except appeals. Except appeals. Appeals, speaking time per side is 10 minutes, 3 minutes rebuttal, and 2-minute conclusion. That's on appeals. We'll go to special items, public hearing. Number 1, ordinance calendar number 6241, ordinance to adopt the 2020 operating budget. And what we're going to do is we're going to postpone that until November. We have a budget hearing. We will not discuss it. We have a budget hearing on November the 18th and 19th. And once that takes place, we will go ahead and have the meeting and discuss it in detail. But anyone wishing to comment on that from the council or the ordinance can come up and speak on that right now if they wish. So ordinance calendar number 6041, ordinance to adopt the 2020 operating budget. Is there anyone wish to speak on that? I have one more. I'm sorry. Okay. Number 2, ordinance calendar number 6242, ordinance to establish the 2024 capital improvement budget and capital assets. The same will apply. It will come up and discussed at the November 18th meeting, and then at our next meeting, we'll go in greater detail. Anyone wishing to speak on that? I have a motion to close. Motion by Mr. Toledano, second by Mr.
No, sir.
Mr. Thompson. Okay. All righty. Do we have a vote? Please vote.
Motion is unanimous, 1 absent.
Thank you. Okay, we'll go to our public meeting. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll again, please?
Mr. Dean? Mr. Fitzgerald? Mr. Thompson? Mr. Toledano? Mr. Tanner? Mr. Belisario?
Yes.
Mr. Lorino?
Here.
Mr. Groby? Mr. Canulet? Miss O'Brien? Mr. Stefanczyk? Mr. Bender? Miss Blanchard? Mr. Smith? You have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. We'll go over the items that we have pulled. We have ordinance calendar number 6241
Wait, we need to
to be
vote.
pulled.
We have to vote.
We have to vote to postpone.
I'm sorry.
Postpone.
What's that? I'm sorry.
Need a vote, postpone.
Okay. We have ordinance calendar to adopt the 2020 operating budget. We need a motion to postpone.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Belisario, second by Mr. Canulet. Please vote.
Motion is unanimous, one absent.
Thank you. Number 2, ordinance calendar number 6242, ordinance to establish the 2024 capital improvement budget and capital assets. Have a motion, please.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Balisaro, second by Mr. Taladano. Please vote.
Motion is unanimous, one absent.
Thank you. Madam President, presentations?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tonight, we have some bad news that I need to tell you about. Deborah Ahrens, as you all know, our Assistant Director of Facilities, her son-in-law died in an automobile accident yesterday. So Deborah does everything to take care of us all the time. So please remember Deborah and her family and in your prayers. His name was Jeff Araby, and many of you may remember his mother, who worked for the school board for so long. So it was such a tragedy for all of us. Also, Mr. Chairman, in lieu of Employee of the Month, for this month, I'd like to recognize our hardworking employees of Tammany Utilities, the Department of Public Works, and our Trace Rangers for going above and beyond in our response to Tropical Storm Olga last month. Despite power failures at 35 lift stations and 15 wells, and thanks to the diligence of our Tammany Utilities employees, not a single system lost pressure or required a boiled water advisory. These crews were on standby and out before first light, delivering generator power, or manually servicing the lift stations to prevent this from occurring. They worked throughout the weekend to maintain the pressure until the power returned. Not only did Public Works crews remove downed trees and limbs from our roadways, they've since collected over 3,000 cubic yards of debris from residents across the parish, and they are still making passes to pick the rest up. And our Trace Rangers, they promptly cleared fallen limbs and debris from the trace, so residents were not prohibited from using it once the weather cleared, which was pretty quickly, by the way. So if you will, Mr. Chairman and council members, please help me as I thank them for the job that they did so well during that short period of time. So thank you, guys.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. That's it.
That's it. Thank you, Madam President. Appreciate it. Number 2, Mr. Taladano.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moreno. Ms. Core was scheduled to appear, let me see if I can get this working. Scheduled to appear this evening, but we're asking that matter be deferred and her appearance be noted to be appearing on the record in December instead of tonight, in deference to the depth of the docket, shall we say, tonight. Got a lot of stuff tonight.
Well, thank you, sir. That's very nice. Thank you, sir. We'll postpone it till next month.
So moved.
Thank you, sir. Okay. We'll go to appointments. Resolution to appoint Kayla Gilchrist to replace Mike Lopez, resigned on the Board of Commissioners of St. Tammany Parish Recreation District Number 11. Mr. Fitzgerald?
So move.
Motion by Mr. Fitzgerald, second by Mr. Thompson. Please vote.
Motion is unanimous, one absent.
Thank you. Number 2, resolution to appoint Paul Upshaw to replace Brett Cordell, who resigned on the Board of Commissioners for St. Tammany Parish Water District Number 3.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Balisaro, second by Mr. Taladano. Please vote.
Motion is unanimous, one absent.
Thank you. Okay. We'll go to the consent calendar. We have a few items that are pulled. Ordinance for introduction that are going to be pulled is ordinance number 56268. Ordinance calendar number 19, ordinance 6282. Under resolutions, we have resolution C-6185. Number 2, C-6186. And that's all we have. Mr. Dean? Mr. Fitzgerald? Mr. Thompson? Mr. Toledano?
No, thank you, no.
Mr. Balisaro?
None.
Mr. Groby? Mr. Canulet? Ms. O'Brien? Mr. Fonstick?
Just a typo correction, but on the second ordinance for introduction, I know it says voting precinct 914, and then it says Ward 8, District 14.
Ward
It
9.
can't be Ward 8 and Precinct 9, starting with a 9. And I think if Teresa understands that, we can get that taken care of.
It's been corrected.
Okay. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Steve. Anything else, sir? Mr. Bender? Ms. Blanchard? Mr. Smith? Thank you. Okay. Ordinance number 5, ordinance calendar number 6268, ordinance to amend the Code of Ordinance, St. Tammany Parish, Chapter 26, to provide for enforcement by the Justice of the Peace Courts and Constables. Mr. Han, I believe you're going to speak on this for us, sir? Put Terry's on. Yes, sir.
Okay. This is the next step in conjunction with the legislation we had passed and was signed by the governor relative to the Justice of the Peace Courts and Constables assisting the parish in the enforcement of our code and any violations that may occur.
Okay. Any question from the council? Mr. Bender?
Mr. Chairman, I just have one clarification question of Mr. Fontenot. Sitting on our code enforcement people, this that we've worked on for quite a while does not exclude our code enforcement people. There's a little bit of confusion, at least among a few people in my area. Code enforcement will still be able to, along with a police department, a sheriff's department, depending upon what it might be. So let's say noise, for example, okay? Under this, code enforcement, police department, sheriff's department would be able to enforce excessive noise with these handheld decibel meters, which, you know, I know are available. The sheriff has made me aware that he has them in every group of vehicles. So can you just assure us that that is the case, this will remain the case, that code enforcement will still be involved on this end?
Specifically to noise, code enforcement does not handle noise. Because of the expertise required, the equipment required, we refer those to the sheriff's office.
Okay, so
the issues that we're looking at are junk, trash, and debris, long grass, harborage for vermin, those types of uses. Our code enforcement will still be enforcing those, but we'd also, the constables and JPs would be able to enforce those regulations also. We have a CEA that's being developed right now that outlines exactly which ones. Those things that are more complicated, such as zoning violations, building permit violations, those types of things would still be handled by the parish staff.
okay, and if I could, Mr. Chairman, I would like to say, so there's nothing behind my question, that I've been very pleased through the years up to now with the quality of the service provided by our code enforcement people. No matter what their workload might be, okay, as we've tightened things up, they have been outstanding in responding to anything that I personally have turned in. And I know to some of the people in my constituency, so I'd like to express my appreciation on that. And Sidney, thank you for the clarification.
Thank you. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Belisario, second by Mr. Canulette. Please vote.
No vote.
No vote? Okay. Okay, I forgot to,
It's
I
introduction.
forgot to ask for a motion to approve all items not pulled from the consent calendar.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Canulette, second by Mr. Belisario. All right, please vote.
Motion is unanimous, one absent.
Thank you. Number 19, ordinance calendar number 6282, ordinance to create prospective precincts changes the configuration boundaries of designations of its elected precincts. Mr. Han.
Particular one is relative to correcting the legals descriptions on certain precincts. We had the maps were correct, but the legals didn't match what was on the maps. So that's what this ordinance does. So we're amending the ordinance in certain respects, but the main part of the ordinance relative to correcting the legal description is being accomplished by this.
Okay. Any questions? Seeing no questions, motion? Motion by Ms. O'Brien, second by Mr. Groby. Thank you. Go to resolutions. Resolution number 1, CS number C-6185, resolution approving the issuance of refunding bonds of Waterworks District Number 2. Mr. Fitzgerald, I think Mr. Allen is here. I don't know if he's here or not.
Here he is.
Okay, there he is.
Good evening, Alan Offner, with regard to the refunding of the outstanding callable maturities of the Series 2008 general obligation bonds of Waterworks District Number 2. Right now, those bonds are outstanding at an average interest rate about 4.55%. And we've received an offer to purchase to reduce that interest rate to 2.40%. This will save the taxpayers annual debt service reduction will be $16,365 a year, which equals about 2/3 a mil. So this will be be an advantage to the taxpayers because the district can lower the millage necessary to pay debt service.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Fitzgerald?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Fitzgerald, second by Mr. Thompson. Please vote.
You're ahead of the game.
Motion is unanimous, one absent.
Thank you, sir. Resolution number 2, resolution CS number C-6186, resolution to take action on warranty and performance obligations. Mr. Smith.
Chairman, we would like to offer an amendment to this resolution. If you look at your list of warranty obligations here, it would be the 4th one on that list dealing with Koop Drive, and we're in some communications with that developer about some work that's being done through our engineering department. And so we would like to offer a motion to amend, to remove this warranty obligation until next month's meeting. and so that we can amend it now and then go forward with the remaining items on this warranty obligation resolution.
Okay, so you're making a motion to amend it and remove that portion of it?
That's right.
Okay.
Second.
I'm sorry, Mr. Smith?
Pardon?
Oh, okay.
I did, I made the motion.
Okay, fine.
gave the second.
Okay, second by Mr. Belisario. Thank you. Please vote.
Motion is unanimous, one absent.
Okay, and I need to do one for, now I need to do one for the regular. Okay, now I need a motion again, Mr. Smith? I'm sorry.
On the second one, Lake Ramsey Phase 4.
Okay.
Good afternoon, council. We been working aggressively because of some supplier problems they had with supplying us with the adequate people to put this equipment in. We've had to find other resource to do this, and it's taken some time to get that resolved. I think we finally got it completed as of earlier part of this week to get this resolved so we can complete this obligation that we have, which I expect hopefully in the next few weeks to be completed around the weather. We did request for a extension for a month on the obligation to allow us time to go ahead and complete this without going through the call of the performance obligation, that we could get everything resolved by then.
I move to extend it for a month.
You have a motion to extend it?
Second.
To amend, Mr. Taladano?
Second.
Second by Mr. Taladano. Mr. Smith?
To adopt the resolution as amended, but it's
Okay,
already been
but
done.
we have another one to go with it, so
No
we'll
problem.
do them in just a minute.
Okay.
Come right back to you.
Okay.
All right, so thank you.
Thank you.
Please vote.
Motion is unanimous, one absent.
Thank you. Mr. Smith?
To make a motion to adopt the resolution as amended.
Motion by Mr. Smith to adopt as recommended. Ms. Blanchard, second. Please vote.
Motion is unanimous, one absent.
Okay, thank you. All righty, we'll move right on to the appeals. Okay, we'll go ahead and move right on to the appeals. We have just another note for that. Note, speaking time per side is 10 minutes, 3 minutes rebuttal, 2-minute conclusion. Number one, Robert Francesco appealing the zoning commission approval on May 7, 2019 to rezone 28.9 acres west of Highway 59, S25, T7S, R11E from A-1 Suburban District to A-4 Single Family Residential District, Ward 4, District 5. Mr. Taladano.
Mr. Lorino, thank you very much. Just for information purposes, items number 1 and 2 are related. We continue to work with the developers as well as the property owners in interest on this matter. I move to postpone it for 2 months.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Taladano, move to postpone, second by Mr. Thompson.
Mr. Toledano, just to confirm, that would be coming up again at the January meeting or the February meeting?
Let's see, thinking out loud, it would be the February meeting.
Okay,
Thank you very
thank you.
much.
Okay. Thank you. Number 2.
We have to vote.
Oh, go ahead. You hit it?
Mr. Smith? Motion is unanimous, one absent.
Number 2, Robert Francisco appealing the zoning commission approval on May 7, 2019 to rezone 70.9 acres west of Highway 59, south of Dove Park Road from A-1 Suburban District to A-4 Single Family Residential District, PUD, Plan Unit Development Overlay, and major amendment to the PUD Plan Unit Overlay, Ward 4, District 5. Mr. Toledano.
For the same reasons I stated previously, I move to postpone this to the February meeting.
Okay, motion by Mr. Toledano, second by Mr. Thompson to postpone. Please vote.
Motion is unanimous, one absent.
Number 3, Ivan Malafik, appealing the zoning commission denial on August 6, 2019 to rezone 3.93 acres located south of Highway 435, east of W Mermaid Lane, west of White Oak Lane, from A-1 Suburban District and RO Rural Overlay to HC-3 Highway Commercial District and RO Rural Overlay, Ward 10, District 6. Mr. Tanner is not here. Mr. Stefanczyk. Mr. Stefanczyk. I'm sorry?
Are you going to have each side make their presentation?
Sure. If he wants to. I was just coming to you to let you talk and see what you wanted to do with it.
Well, I want them to.
Absolutely. That's what I asked you. Anyone here to speak on it? Come on up, sir.
How you all doing today? My name is Ivan Milicevic. I own 28480 Highway 435. I have winery up there, vineyards. I'm building right now for reception hall and wine tasting. And I have 200 parking lots in front of my vineyards and building, and I need 200 more. So I'm asking rezone 3.9 acres to HC3 commercial, so I can have it for parking lot, another 200 spots. So.
Okay. Is there anyone else to speak or oppose? Seeing none?
I talked to Richard today, and we had a discussion on this, and I've been up in this area before. There's plenty of space for whatever he needs at this stage, and if he's going to need more parking spaces, he'll build those as it comes up. But Richard has asked that we overturn the zoning denial, so I move to override the denial.
Okay, motion by Mr. Stefanczyk, second by Mr. Canulette to override. Please vote.
Motion is unanimous, one absent.
I need a motion for ordinance of Mr. Stefanczyk and Mr. Canulette, introduction of the ordinance. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Number 4, Paul Marone on behalf of Allstate Financial Company appealing the failure of the motion to approve on October 9th, 2019, the rezoning of 90.31 acres located south and west of Oshner, west of Highway 21, excuse me, Covington, from PBC-2 Planned Business Center to AML Advanced Manufacturing and Logistics District, Ward 1, District 1. Mr. Dean, do you want to start anything on this, sir?
Yeah, I guess, is this on?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I'd like to make a suggestion or request of the chair to allow each side to, instead of 10, 3, and 2, we could go 15, 3, and 2.
15, 3, and 2?
So add 5 extra minutes to each side.
Okay. Well, I have no problem. I don't know if somebody else would have a problem on that, and
And I don't know if I need to
vote
put
on
that
it or
in form
not.
of a motion or what.
Well, let's just see if anybody challenges it, and if we have to
I got
vote,
you.
we'll vote. Anybody have a problem with allowing, this is a pretty lengthy decision, and I think 5 more minutes would help on each side. That's just my personal opinion, but defer. Yes, sir, I haven't seen it yet. It's not on yet. You go right ahead.
We ran into this problem a couple of years ago, or more than a few years ago, and we kept, excuse me, we used to have 5 minutes per side and 3 minutes per rebuttal. And people said that's not enough time, so we put together a committee that had councilmen, it had people who present both sides on this committee, and we came up with these numbers and said that should be plenty of time to handle any kind of a thing that comes before this council. So in our ordinance, and that's what we abide by up here, is the ordinances that we develop. And we've got one, and it says each side will be given 8 minutes to present their case, 3 minutes to summarize. I'm sorry, 10 minutes to present their case, 3 minutes to summarize, and if anybody from the council asks either side any questions, then both sides have 2 minutes rebuttal. And along that time, we felt like this was sufficient for any case that comes before here. I know there's some long cases, but when we go to the point of just continuing to give additional time, then I think it's a problem. And it'll continue on into the future. And my contention is if we don't vote, if we don't support our own ordinances, then I don't know how we expect anybody else to support them. And that's all I have to say. I'll vote no against any additions of time, and you know I will.
That's fine. Mr. Bender?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to support Councilman Dean's request. I understand we have an ordinance, and I also understand that people from both sides have put a lot of time and effort into this. We all know this because of the amount of information we've received from the citizens and also from the development side. So I would just say this, I would rather hear a little bit more. I agree with Mr. Dean on that. I would rather know a little bit more before having a vote. And I would like people on both sides to feel like no matter how the vote would turn out, that they had their opportunity to present enough information to the council to make an intelligent decision. So I will vote yes and support Mr. Dean.
Okay. Mr. Smith?
Yes, since we are getting into that time component already, this is exactly what's going to happen when we have the ordinary time, as Mr. Stefanczyk talked about, the time that's already allotted according to the ordinance. And I have to agree with him. If we have rules that we put in place, then we need to follow our own rules. I think that we're going to have adequate time for both sides to be able to answer any questions, especially when it comes back up here, to give them more time concerning their particular presentations. So I cannot support that, but I'm sorry, Mr. Dean.
Okay. I appreciate it. I appreciate it. Anyone else? Mr. Groby?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Chair. I'm going to support Mr. Dean's request for time. We need it. But I'm going to also remind everyone that we also had a recent election. We saw a pretty low turnout. We need to stand with the citizens, allow them to speak. That's why we're here. Let's give them more time. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Ballestero, I think I'll get the vote by just going right down the list here. Go ahead, Mr. Ballestero.
I would support what Marty Dean has stated. To me, it's reasonable. Both sides have put a lot of time in. I think I've read over 200 emails, aside from text messages and phone calls. And what I have seen through that process is a divergent difference in what these people understand. So I'm waiting for the person who's going to handle the presentation to speak with clarity.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let me see. Ms. Blanchard. Yes, ma'am.
I'll make a second. I believe Mr. Dean made a motion to extend the time by 5 minutes, and I'll call the question.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Dean made a motion, but we did not get a second for it. Do we have a second?
He just did.
Okay, sweet. Thank you, ma'am. Okay. Ms. Blanchard, call the question. Motion is to extend the time limit for presentation from 10 minutes to 5 minutes. Please vote.
15.
I'm sorry, 10 minutes to 15 minutes. I'm not taking it away.
We're going to have something different.
Motion passes, 11 yeas, 2 nays, 1 absent.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Dean, anything else you have on that issue? Anything about me talking and questions or anything like that after the press? Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Okay, perfect. Okay. Before we get started, Mr. Marone, I'm going to assume, I just want to make sure, because I know everybody's very interested in this, and I want the council members to understand. You have your speakers, and you'll advise us who you want. The only thing I need to know is, Ms. Wagner, and will you be the main person for the other side when it comes up?
Lowen.
I'm sorry?
Randy Lowen.
Okay, Randy, thank you. I just wanted to have it when that time comes, so thank you very much. Mr. Marone, what we're going to do is we're going to start this 15 minutes, and I'm sorry.
Here's the 4 polls.
Okay, okay. Well, Paul will decide that.
Okay.
All right.
We have about half a dozen cards for 4, a lot more in post.
Okay.
Could I ask a question, Mr. Chairman,
You
before we
can
get
ask
started?
anything you want before
Just
we're
for
not getting started.
clarification for Mr. Lowen and I, will it be a rolling 15, we'll have the 15 minutes? I presume then he will have his 15 minutes, then we'll each have 3 minutes for rebuttal, and then each 2 minutes to close?
That is correct.
Okay.
What we'll do is, when you start your time and you start, and if you want to call someone up, we'll stop it until that person comes up.
Understood.
And we'll start it, vice versa,
Okay.
for the other side. So I guess, Mr. Marone, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the council, Paul Marone on behalf of the property owner, Allstate Financial Corporation. This appeal comes to you after a 5-3 vote to approve our request for an AML zoning of this particular property. Because that vote did not reach the 6 required for an affirmative recommendation, it gave rise to the necessity of this appeal. The request, as you are well aware from the information that you have, is for the sole purpose of accommodating a Medline distribution facility on this particular piece of property. That facility is proposed to be 800,000 square feet with the ability to expand to 1 million square feet if the market ever dictates. That expansion, though uncertain, if it were to happen, would not be within the next 10 to 12 years, or would be within about 10 to 12 years. So at the outset of this process, we made clear to Councilman Dean and to the residents that we would only be requesting the AML zoning on the needed footprint for Medline. The request before you was for 90 acres. As the site plan has been refined, we are now in a position to amend that request to reduce it from the 90 acres to 69.46 acres, which is the footprint, the sole footprint that Medline will need. I have a survey, I have a legal description that I'd like to submit. I'd like to formally amend the request to this acreage, which is part of the original 90, but is just shrunk down so that we are not asking for AML on anything other than what Medline actually needs. And we would ask for your consideration with regards to this amended request. This facility will be distribution only. There will be no manufacturing at this facility of any type. This property, as you will see in the packet that's been provided to you, does not abut residential on any side. In fact, we have identified for you the closest distances to residential, the closest being the Shady Lakes area, which is about a quarter mile from where this building would be located. This building would be about a half mile from Maison du Lac, 1,100 feet southwest of the existing roundabout at Ochsner Boulevard, and over 2,100 feet from the closest residential dwelling in the villages of Maison du Lac. The villages at Normandy Oaks. As you can see, the property is tucked against the interstate, and it is surrounded by non-residential uses on all sides. You will also notice the buffers. There's over 60 feet of buffer along I-12 that grows to 130 feet. There's also a significant stand of mature trees within the I-12 right-of-way that would remain. On the east side of the property, you'll notice that there's a buffer of 210 feet. On the west side, over 700 feet. On the north side, over 200 feet. The green space at 800,000 square feet, the building at 800,000 square feet, 26.41 acres of this site will be retained in green space. If the facility is ever expanded to its maximum capacity, you would still have over 18.24 acres of green space. So there is significant green space on all sides of this, which provides excellent buffer and which ultimately will render this facility almost out of sight entirely. There is in your packet a rendering that shows a vantage point from I-12 of what this facility will look like. That was done with Google Earth with existing vegetation that is on that right-of-way right now. And as you can see, it almost entirely camouflages the entire facility. I would respectfully submit to you that the AML ordinance that creates the zone that we're requesting does not contain any provision that requires any greater distance from residential properties than what we have on this project. I would also point out to you that this property is further from residential properties than almost every other industrial zone property in St. Tammany Parish. With regards to the traffic that would be generated by this particular site, and in particular the trucks, I'm going to give you what we believe to be the expected truck trips that would be generated by the facility. It's important to note that only about 60% of those trucks would in fact be the largest trucks in the Medline fleet, which would be the double axle. The other 40 would be the straight line trucks as well as the vans. You have pictures of that fleet in your packet so that you can see the size of trucks that we're talking about. But at startup, in mid-2021, there would be approximately 50 to 60 truck trips. That is very close to the existing number of trips from the existing facility that is located on the south side of I-12, just to the west of this facility. At approximately 2025, as the facility grows, you would be at approximately 100 trips. If the facility is ever expanded to 1 million square feet, and if it ever reaches maximum capacity, which would be at 2031 or beyond, then the maximum trip count would be 170 trips. It's important to have context when I give you those numbers, and here's the context I want you to remember. Those trips, the 170, the worst case scenario, 10 to 12 years from now, that would amount to less than 1% of the existing traffic today that travels Highway 21 and Highway 1077. Less than 1%. That is 0.02% of the traffic that travels I-12 in front of this facility, this proposed facility, every day. I would respectfully submit to you that putting less than 1% of the existing traffic flow onto these roadways will have any material impact on their functionality. The numbers simply do not support that. With regards to the timing of these trucks and the trips generated from this facility, they will be off-peak. Outbound will be in the morning, most of them leaving before 5 a.m. because the deliveries to the hospitals require that they be there by 5 a.m. The inbound, most of them in the afternoon, but off-peak. Medline's operations are designed to avoid putting traffic on the roads during the peak morning hours and the peak afternoon hours. Let's talk about the routes that will be taken for these vehicles. First, the typical inbound route would be I-1077 and Pinnacle Parkway. 1077 because there will be a dedicated turn lane that will allow you to get right on the extension road and bring you to the facility. Pinnacle Parkway because there are large exchanges there that would put you on a 4-lane roadway. It would take you to a signalized intersection at Highway 21 onto Ochsner Boulevard and into the facility. Outbound, until there is an allowable left turn at the connector road and Highway 1077, Medline has agreed to send its truck traffic to the east, which would mean they would go to Highway 21. If going west, they would be able to turn on the dedicated lane that takes you onto I-12 west. If they're going east, they would be able to cross the signalized intersection at Highway 21 to Pinnacle Parkway, where you have a 4-lane boulevard to take you to the large interchanges that are there. They have committed to do that. They will do that. They have the ability to program their trucks, and they will do so accordingly. The employees of this facility, all of those shifts start off-peak. There will be 2 shifts, none of which start between the morning hour peaks or the evening peaks. Noise. We would submit to you that this facility, the facility itself, generates no noise. There is an existing Medline facility that's been here for about 15 years. Nobody even knows it's there. The same here. There is no noise generated outside of this facility whatsoever. I would also submit to you that the trucks that you see in that packet traveling 30 miles an hour, which is the speed limit on the proposed connector road and on Ochsner Boulevard, would not have any material noise impact on any residential developments. Now, that being said, we have met with Mr. Green a number of times. We have heard the concerns that he has about the location of the connector road to Shady Lakes and to his home. We did not design the right-of-way, but we are prepared to make a significant gesture in that regard. Medline is prepared to donate to St. Tammany Parish $500,000 to be used for noise mitigation along the Shady Lakes property line as it abuts the proposed connector road. I would also point out that Medline is in the process of converting its fleet to electric vehicles. There is a pilot that has already started. You may have seen this with Amazon and Walmart, who are already there. By the time this facility opens, we will have four of the vehicles in the fleet will be electric. Now, it's important to also keep in mind and have context, not only on the trips generated here and the trips that are on the roadways today, but I think you have to look at what is the existing zoning of this site and what are the trips that would be generated by that zoning. That zoning is PBC2, Planned Business Campus 2. And the trips that would be generated by a business park of that size with that zoning would be at a minimum 4 to 5 times the trips that I just mentioned to you. And those trips would be at peak where ours are not at peak. And I think that is important, and I hope you will remember that. A business park of this size would be expected to generate over 3,300 trips, where the maximum that our facility would be able to generate would be 800 trips. I would also tell you that truck traffic would be a continual part of the traffic in any PBC2 development. So to believe that if PBC2 were developed here, there would be no trucks, that simply is not the case. With regards to drainage, that is not typically an issue that is discussed at zoning, but I want to touch on it. We know that there's a 25% reduction required on a 100-year storm event. We know that if we can't meet that, we cannot get a building permit. I will tell you, you have a unique situation here because rather than building detention ponds when this facility is built, those detention facilities are already in place. The Wainers have already constructed them for their entire properties in this area. In that system, there is currently 109 acre-feet of additional storage. That alone would more than accommodate what would be needed for this particular development. But there will be an additional 25 acre-feet that will be constructed. Once that is done, we will greatly exceed the requirements of St. Tammany Parish. But I will make you another proposal this evening, and it is this. St. Tammany Parish requires 25% reduction. We will abide by a 30% reduction on the Medline site. So we will exceed your requirements, and we will obligate ourselves to do that tonight. In addition, we will make sure that that detention facility acts as a first flush system so that the first inch of rainwater that hits there will be treated before it gets into any neighboring streams or bodies of water. And that is our commitment to you this evening. PBC2, if you will look on page 6 of the packet that is before you, when you're asked to consider this particular development, you must also consider what could be built, what is permitted under our existing zoning today. Because to look at this in a vacuum would be a mistake. To say that the property is going to stay in its current condition would not be accurate. That property is going to change. And what you see on page 6 is exactly what can be built. It is permitted today. And what is on there? Well, that is a high-intensity office and commercial use development laid out by our architect with the requirements and provisions of PBC2 in mind. PBC2 allows 200-foot buildings. On that plan, you will see that there is almost 6 million square feet of office and retail. There are 16,000 parking spaces that are identified on that site. We have said repeatedly, I'm going to say it again here this evening, this proposal is far less impactful than what can be done on this site at PBC2. The traffic generated by PBC2 is at a minimum 4 to 5 times greater than what this facility would produce. The usable space, if developed under PBC2, and look at that drawing, is 4 to 5 times greater than the maximum capacity we are proposing for this particular use. All of that being said, this development is far less impactful than what you could do and what you would have under PBC2. I'll conclude and then I'll yield to Mr. Massengill, Mr. Chairman, but I'll conclude with this. We have a unique and excellent opportunity to keep an excellent corporate citizen and great business here in St. Tammany Parish. Medline went through an exhaustive search to determine a location that was suitable for them, and they do this all over the country. They've determined that this is that site. Your staff has recommended approval of our request. 5 of your 8 zoning commissioners that were present at that meeting voted in favor of our request, and I would urge you to vote in favor of our request this evening. Thank you, and I'll yield my time to Mr. Massengill.
Thank you, Mr. Morrow. Hey, Chris, let's go.
Can we reserve that time, we have 36 seconds left for rebuttal?
No, I'd rather you go ahead and
Okay.
go through it right now. It's not going to add on anymore, so you might as well get the 36 seconds over right now.
I will utilize the 36 seconds as fast as I possibly can. I've got 3 things in to say in the course of this time frame. As your Chief Economic Development Officer and leading the economic development in St. Tammany.
Got it. Go ahead.
Great. Let me start again. The St. Tammany Corporation, as you all know, members of the council and Madam President, we're charged with the responsibility of bringing good jobs and strong investments into this parish. This project represents that. There's been 2 things that have been significant here that I think needs a little bit of clarity. One, there's been a significant effort to disparage the company of Medline and the jobs. I want to point out to you in the packet that's provided to you the cost-benefit analysis that we commissioned on our own that demonstrates $18 million of new taxes back into the coffers of St. Tammany Parish. Almost $14 million in new payroll. I'll come back.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Mr. Lowen. You can, why don't you just hold on for a minute and we'll let them put that up.
Just a second to set
Yeah,
this
yeah,
up.
that's what I said. We'll just let them do that. That's for me? Show back.
Okay, can you see that? Thanks.
Right. Oops, excuse me, I'm sorry.
Sure.
Before we get started, are you authorized to speak for the whole 15 minutes on this? Is that how?
I want you to hear from some of the residents and some of the witnesses that we have, so I
Okay.
want to utilize 5 or 6 minutes, if
Okay,
I can, to
and-
outline what we want to tell you.
That's fine. So when you finish, you just call up who's coming next, and go right down.
Yes,
Okay,
sir.
sir.
Thank you.
Hold on one second. Let me put it on there for you. Okay, go ahead, sir.
Randy Lowen, Millen Law Firm, on behalf of the coalition.
Yep.
Randy Lowen on behalf.
Darn it.
We have a new guy operating the clock, so.
all right.
This thing is not doing on, clear. Okay, I'll put 15.
15. I might need Michelle over here to come do this for me, sweetie.
Okay, start it.
Then you hit start, see if
Yeah.
it's good.
Randy Lowen,
All
on
right.
behalf of the Coalition for Responsible Zoning. We've introduced a packet of exhibits, and we left some with you in your mailboxes if you've got it. It's some of the things we want to talk about tonight. We appreciate the extra 5 minutes. I hope we can try and cover all that's in there. Some really important issues before you tonight. I want to tell you, you don't know me, but I want to tell you in 4 words, I'm pro-business and pro bono. Pro-business because we're not against Medline. We're not disparaging them. We just want to show you that this location is not the proper place for them. There are traffic issues, drainage issues. This is the first AML zoning request you've ever had in the parish. We need to look at, do you want to put industrial type facilities in this type of area where residences are? So we want to talk about all that with you tonight. We want to talk a little bit about property values. We want to tell you there are alternate sites. There are sites in Slidell. There are sites between here and Slidell that are very appropriate for them. But let me first just point out to you, you probably know this, but the Louisiana law 33:4721 is in your packet, and that's our duty. And it is for you to promote the health, safety, morals, or general welfare of the community. So if there's sort of a toss-up between the community of a business, their business interest, and the interest of the public, the law tells you, you vote in favor of the public. And tonight we're going to show you that that's what we believe you should do. On traffic, Mr. Marone told you that there would be maybe 170 trips generated. And that may be true, what comes out of their facility. But I want to remind you that there's stuff coming into their facility. There's got to be deliveries coming in so they can load up those trucks. There are employees coming in and out. There's going to be a huge traffic burden on already overburdened streets that are in this area. And you know about this area where I-12 is. It's a death trap. We've said that. And we had an accident there yesterday. We had 4 killed in 2018. I think some people seriously injured yesterday. We can't afford to put more trucks, especially, or cars, on that area. We have some pictures in our exhibits that show you what these traffic accidents look like and some statistics out there. I believe there were 900 or 1,000 accidents from 2013 to now, just in this area. So it's a horrible area to put more trucks on the road, and we're going to have someone come and talk to you about that. As far as the 1% that Mr. Moran mentioned, that less than 1% addition, we don't need any more percent, but especially not trucks. And I think when we make decisions on what type of trucks and developments we're going to have in this area, we've got to recognize that these deadly accidents that are occurring where trucks merge onto Pinnacle Parkway or on Highway 21, or just about every one of them that I've seen occur there. And I tell you, I was doing this pro bono, so why? I live out there. I drive by these accidents all the time. Wednesday, I couldn't get to the office for 2.5 hours. Everybody's going around Highway 22, 190, trying to get away from these things. We just can't afford to put more trucks in this area. There are plenty of other sites that are available to Medline. We just asked that they would take a look at those. Drainage. If you look, here's the Medline facility, and it's hard to tell, but even with their reduced footprint, this is going to be the size larger, just the facility, larger than the New Orleans terminal at the airport. And if you add the parking onto it, it's 6 Superdomes side by side. Imagine that, 6 Superdomes of wetlands and wooded areas is going to be dug up, raised 3 feet or so, filled with concrete that's impervious. Where's all that water going to go? We're going to show you tonight what we think is going to happen. Here is Forest Manor, a nursing home, oxidation ponds right there. If that water drains and gets in the oxidation ponds, it's going to go in where all these elderly residents live. We can't risk that. And here is Shady Oaks subdivision. If the water flows up in here, they've had flooding problems. Look at the pink on the map. That's all flood zone areas. All this green is wetlands right in here. They still don't have the core permit. I want to finish up really quick and let you hear from some of the other witnesses that we have. But I want to remind you that Many of the owners that bought homes in this area did it based on what the zoning was, and they were relying on no decision to come in and just change spot zoning for someone right here for Medline. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more. But I think it's important that we recognize that the citizens have a right to not have their property values really depreciated because of that. One last thing I want to mention, then I'm going to yield my time and come back in rebuttal, but the alternate sites, Slidell North Shore Mall, the mayor over there says they'd love to have it. Highway 1088, right down the next exit, right down, it's a wonderful site. 434 Lacombe. Those are all great sites that are available, big enough for Medline. We'd love to have them here. We want them in the community, just not at this location. So I yield the rest of my time, and I'll be back at rebuttal. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lowe. Hello, Ms. Barber.
Hello. Nice to see you again.
Thank you, ma'am. Just state your name for us, please.
My name is Barbara Jackson. I am a resident of Abita Springs, and I'm also on the Planning and Zoning Commission in Abita Springs. And when industrialization and urbanization hit in the early 1900s, urban dwellers and industry came face to face, and it became very clear that citizens needed protection for their health, safety, and welfare, and that's true now. And in order to provide that protection, zoning laws and ordinances have evolved over the years. And when I look at everything and all the considerations, I feel that we need to protect our citizens. And I know that you have economic interests in the middle, and you have urban dwellers, and you have industry, and you have to seek a balance. But I feel that the balance is slightly on the side of our urban dwellers. And this AM and L zone is not appropriate for this area. It just isn't. And I think there's lots of things that can happen and go wrong. And you can say, oh, they're not, but they do happen. And somehow a big tube of toothpaste comes to mind. And I can see the things that could happen, and you can't back up on those things.
Hello, my name is Tess Crockett. I'm a graduate student at Southeastern Louisiana University. I do wetland planning, protection, and restoration, but in the interest of time, we're going to talk about flooding and drainage. So in July of 2019, on behalf of this project, an application was submitted to the Army Corps of Engineers looking to get permit application for Section 404 permit and water quality certification. Within that application, they stated that 53 acres of forested wetland would be impacted by this. They also were rebutted with that application by Gulf Restoration Network, where it was noted that they have had no environmental impact statement done. It is not consistent with the 2016 executive order or comprehensive master plan of 2017. Also, filling of these waters is against the anti-degradation policy, and it does not adequately describe any type of a mitigation plan. From FEMA directly, in this parish alone, $1.3 billion of U.S. taxpayer money has been spent on insurance claims for developments exactly like this development that they're proposing. And CPRA has previously stated in this parish, more than any other parish in this state, $1.2 billion would be needed to secure the community further against flooding. CPRA has not assessed this development proposal in any way, so any kind of additional increases to the drainage burden or to flood risk to the local watershed has not been done. The risks of rezoning this area are neither completely known, nor are they small in magnitude. And the last thing that I'd like to say, of course, we all know how vital our wetlands are and how much they're depreciating. When you look at forested wetlands, you're looking at a natural sponge. It takes in a lot of water, slowly releases it, and what you're looking at displacing is 1 million gallons of water for every acre of wetland that they are spilling over. That's 46 million gallons of water displaced, and I think that needs a real good look before you consider rezoning this area. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Good evening, council members. My name is Joseph Bistis. I'm a resident of Maison de Lac. I'm here tonight, I think, bringing a qualified experience to this discussion, very pertinent. I'm a previous Director of Business and Industrial Development. I've labored in economic development for many years. I was a President and CEO of a State Economic Development Commission. And as a matter of fact, I was the point person for the city of New Orleans when the last big distribution center came to New Orleans in the early 90s. I was that point person for the city. For the last 15 years, I'm a vice president of an Atlanta-based company, and what I do for that company is site selection. So I have an expertise in site selection, and I've done it in 13 states, and I've stood before many of these bodies presenting my project on behalf of my company. I'm not about NIMBY, I'm about economic development, and we would love to keep Medline here. But I can tell you, based off of my experience and my knowledge and listening to them carefully at the Planning Commission and then going back and doing some research, this is not the right fit. This is absolutely not the right fit. We had it right with the zoning that we did about 5 years ago. And speaking about economic development, if we really want economic development, keep the right zoning, keep the zoning that we have right now, and then you can see full economic development. The taxes that this project would bring, the jobs that we create is a pittance compared to if we keep the zoning that we have in place, it'll bring 10 times that in tax dollars and 100 times of that in jobs, job creations. Why settle? Why are we settling? And by the way, that distribution center that I brought, y'all may remember if you've been around for a few years, it burnt down to the ground. 2 days for the fire department to put it out. 2 full days. This is not the right locations for a number of reasons. And when you're hearing the attorney saying, well, we're going to give you $500,000 for noise mitigation, and on and on and on. This is not the right location. We want Medline, but in another location in this parish. Please support us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, President Brister and ladies and gentlemen of the St. Tammany Council. My name is Donalyn Hassenbohler. I live at 83 Xenia Drive in Flower Estates North. And we're here this evening because Wayner Properties and Medline were not successful in convincing the commission to change the zoning, which plop a massive $1 million foot Medline structure in the middle of this lovely residential, educational, hospital, and assisted living of St. Tammany Parish. There's no present zoning of St. Tammany of AML at all, nowhere. Why here? Why now? The thousands of St. Tammany residents who moved here over the years are searching for trees, grass, green spaces, intelligent planning, and appropriate infrastructure. Any rezoning to permit this facility is a betrayal of these people and belies all those promises. What we've been hearing over the time is we're going to get better access that will be coming to handle the traffic, green space that will be protected, about wetlands that will be mitigated, about floodplains that will get 25% protection, now 30, about jobs that will be created. These are all hypotheticals. There are no guarantees there. Let's build the infrastructure first, then invite all the businesses to come in and use our lands the way that you'd like to have them. But let's get the infrastructure there. Right now, our roads and our bridges are parking lots. I'm going. One more thing. The very fact that we have to have all this mitigation means that this is not the right place. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Maria Mayer, Flower Estate South. I implore you to think on your own and use sound rationalization in denying this zoning change. Marty Dean apparently is not interested in the concerns of over 1,300 constituents who have petitioned their opposition to Medline. Please deny this request and protect your districts and the future of our parish. Mr. Wayner does not live here, but we do. Mr. Dimitri in Medline Chicago-based executive management does not live here, but we do. Marty should be interested in what his constituents want and not to validate the benefit of a developer and a multi-billion cancer-producing business. Please vote appropriately based on facts and not empty promises and false statements. The future of our children and grandchildren is more important than the interests of Marty Dean or the investment and advancement of Bruce Wayner and Medline. Remember, the ethylene oxide is a tremendous concern. If this zoning changes, different chemical productions can occur. And the Medline spokesman, Blair Curran, said that it was only a distribution and production plant, and they do not do sterilization. I asked you to check their website and find out that they show how they sterilize, okay? There are articles relating to Waukegan, Illinois, and Willowbrook, which describe the disastrous effects of these stereogenic facilities. Ethylene oxide is emitted into the air, which is a known carcinogen, which also causes birth defects in the areas of existing Medline plants. This is not something that we need in our area. Please do the right thing. May God bless you, and may the Holy Spirit guide you in making the right decision for our parish. Thank you.
Now we got 7 seconds. We're good.
Just hold it.
You have 7 seconds.
We have 7 seconds.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, I appreciate it. Thank you very much for everyone coming up and making their presentation. And now we'll go to the second part of the rebuttal. And Mr. Marone, you go right ahead, sir.
Thank you. I would begin by pointing out and reiterating what has already been said, and that is that there will be no sterilization whatsoever on this site. I would submit that the AML doesn't allow that, but we are willing to and commit to deed restrict from that. This will only be a distribution facility. We've maintained that from the beginning, and those are the facts. With regards to the truck and traffic numbers that I gave you, those numbers are in and out numbers. Those numbers do account for all of the trips. In regards to the different sites and the problems on I-12, respectfully, each of the sites that were suggested, the alternative sites, would put those same trucks on I-12. Those same trucks would be on I-12.
Okay.
They most certainly would. If you put this facility in Slidell, those same trucks are going to be traveling I-12 in a westerly direction. I would also point out that there's an inconsistency. You were just told over 15 minutes about all of the problems that this facility and changing the zoning will create. But then you were told to keep the existing zoning. But the existing zoning exacerbate and makes worse all of those problems. So I would urge you to consider the facts. You were asked to consider the facts. Please do. Consider the facts. And the facts do not belie a lot of the arguments here. This development is far less impactful than the PBC2. The numbers that I've given you do not support problems or creating problems with flow or traffic on our roadways. Less than 1%, whether you're a truck or you're a car, less than 1%, I would submit to you, cannot make a significant difference on the functionality of those roadways. Relying on the zoning, you were also asked, you also told that the residents out there had relied on the zoning when they bought their homes. I go back to what I said a minute ago, and that is this, that if they relied on the PBC2, then the 6 million square feet of office and retail space is what was permitted when those homes were purchased. Okay? And I'm cognizant of their concern. I respect their concerns, but I disagree on the impact. PBC2 will have far greater impact on the infrastructure, on everything in that area. I can tell you, one 200-foot building there is going to be far more visible than a 40-foot Medline facility that is totally encased with green space. So I would urge you to follow the facts. And the facts tell us that this AML zone with Medline, an excellent existing corporate citizen, is in the best interest of St. Tammany Parish.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Let's talk about the facts just a little bit. If we're going to have trucks entering the interstate on Slidell, Highway 1088, 434, that's not the death trap area. You know, we can have trucks there. We've got capacity there. That's a fact. AML, it does allow manufacturing. Just look at the zoning ordinance. It allows manufacturing. Maybe not today, but what if Medline sells the facility? What if they change their mind? It could be tomorrow. It's not an appropriate zoning. Deed restrictions. I think I was hearing Mr. Roney talk about deed restrictions. So what if they violate a deed restriction? Maybe what if they decide to change it? Do they have to come to you? Do the citizens get a voice in it? Do the citizens become the vigilantes now to watch this and be sure it's going all right? And then what if there's something wrong? What's the penalty? Do you go to court? Who pays for that? It's just not an appropriate solution. And the last point I want to make, Mr. Morone talked about existing zoning. PBC2 is not the correct thing. Well, let's think about that for just a minute. Let me tell you about this Supreme Court case. It's on spot zoning. Generally, you have the authority to do anything that's reasonable with zoning. But here's what the Supreme Court said about spot or piecemeal zoning. It's in the Four States Realty case, 1975. Rezoning on a piecemeal or spot basis is highly suspect. Generally, property owners may rely on the previous exercise of police power in zoning, that's what we're asking you, expecting that changes in zoning will only be made so as to affect vested property interest when the change is required to assure the public welfare. A parish or city, whoever the governing body is, purporting to act under its police powers cannot create in a large area of property an island or parcel of land of a different zone. The Supreme Court said you can't pick out a zone and just make it something else to support a property owner. And let's just talk about it one more time, one more thing. In your packet is the purchase and sale agreement between Medline and Mr. Wayner's company, Allstate. We got it from the Corps of Engineers. It's public records. The price isn't there, so we don't have to worry about that. But paragraph 7.1.2, I want to call your attention to it, says this, that if they don't close the sale and Medline doesn't buy the property, the purchaser shall be obligated, that's Medline, shall be obligated to reimburse the seller for all the costs and expenses incurred to have the property rezoned back to its prior zoning, PBC2. Here's their purchase agreement. They're saying PBC2 is the proper zoning. And if you don't approve it for Medline, well, we're going to go back to what it really should be, PBC2. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Morone, we have closing now for 2 minutes. Yeah, yes, sir, Mr. I'm sorry.
This is not the place to have 2 minutes. It's after there are any questions by the council.
Okay, we can do that. Okay, that'll be great. That'll be great. We can do that. Mr. Dean.
Yeah, I know that you have a few questions to ask Mr. Reno, so I'll.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Mr. Dean. Well, and thank you, Mr. Stavacic. I appreciate it. I think we'll all agree on this. It's a very interesting and tough decision, but I want to touch on a few things, and I'm going to ask Ms. Collin to touch on that. If the council will look and remember, my last 4 years I've been up here, that when a zoning issue comes forward, we never talk traffic and drainage. We never do. And that's okay. And I'm happy about that because I think we need to change the rules because I believe that's how you have a full picture of what comes forward and you vote on. But that's not the case now. That's not the rule we're operating under now. So I asked our legal staff, our DA legal staff, if they would look at that and make sure that we're doing what we could be doing. So Ms. Collin, would you just introduce yourself and touch on that for me, please?
I'm Carlin Riles. I'm an assistant district attorney, and I'm assigned both to the council and the planning and zoning commissions along with Emily Cuvion. And We decided that the best way to explain this would actually be to read from one of the revised statutes about what zoning regulations do. So both the council and the public has an understanding of, this is not all of the considerations that the council can consider when making a zoning decision, but this is part of it. So the regulation says that, the statute says that zoning regulation shall be made in accordance with a comprehensive plan and designed to lessen congestion in public streets, secure safety from fire, promote health and general welfare, provide adequate light and air, avoid undue concentration of population, and facilitate adequate transportation, water supply, sewage, schools, parks, and other public requirements. The regulation shall be made with reasonable consideration of the character of the district and its peculiar suitability for particular uses, and with a view to conserving values of buildings and encouraging the most appropriate use of land throughout the municipality. This is just a general overview of what zoning regulations, the zoning commission, and the council can take into consideration, along with many other factors, when making a zoning decision. And would you like me to go into the procedural history of this?
Yes, ma'am.
So again, just to make sure everyone's brought up to speed about the procedural history of this case. This was first heard at the September Zoning Commission meeting, and after a pretty lengthy discussion, it was postponed. There was a community meeting held, which I understand lasted 2 to 3 hours, and the Zoning Commission heard this again, and after another lengthy discussion, the Zoning Commission made a motion to recommend approval of this site. Now, just so everyone understands, the Zoning Commission only makes recommendations to the council, and nothing the Zoning Commission does is final. It all has to be voted on by the council. So they made the motion to approve, and that motion failed. It required 6 votes, and it only had 5. So what's before the council tonight is Allstate Financial Company's appeal of the Zoning Commission's failure to approve. The council tonight can override that, and if they vote to override the recommendation of the Zoning Commission, they will have to introduce an ordinance to amend the zoning map. So tonight would not be the final step. If they voted to override, they would still have to vote to introduce an ordinance, because ultimately the outcome of any zoning recommendation is the council either does or does not amend the parish zoning map. If the council concurs with the failure to approve the request for zoning change, then this would be the last time that the council would hear it. The appellants, the Allstate Financial Company, would have an opportunity to appeal this to the 22nd. So that's kind of a procedural rundown. And if, as you have your discussion, you have any further specific questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Colin. I appreciate that. Mr. Smith, I see the light on. So.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much. And I want to begin, because I have a litany of questions, trying to make a decision here on this question of what has really boiled down to location, because I think everybody's really in favor of the Medline development, but the question is, where is it going to go in St. Tammany Parish? But my first question goes to staff. And on the zoning staff report, Sydney, when I read the section that talks about staff comments, and I get down to the next to the last sentence that starts with the 2025 future land use plan. And it states that that plan designates the site to be developed as a planned district with single unit residential uses while preserving the natural environment. And this is where my question comes in on this sentence. Staff does not have any objection to the request considering the petition AML zoning district allows uses that parallel. That last statement seems to be in contradiction to what I understand you're stating about the 2025 master plan and what it allows. Can you elaborate on that for me?
The 2025 master plan would have been adopted in the land use, I believe, 2003, 2004. Mm-hmm. In 2010, we did the comprehensive rezoning, 2008 through 2010, with most of it culminating in 2010. I think we had 3 of the 5 study areas adopted in that year. At that time, the decision of the council was to zone this property Planned Business Campus 2, the PBC2 designation. The 2025 plan and comprehensive plans under Louisiana state law are advisory in nature. They're not mandatory. And so you will find locations between the 2025 plan and the comprehensive and the rezoning or the zoning of the property that are inconsistent. Some of those are based on location, some of those are based on the historical use of the property, a number of issues, but that final decision, the legally binding decision would be the zoning classification established by the council.
So that is in lies why you say that this is parallel to what the 2025, you make that assertion based on that?
No, it is parallel to the previous decision by the parish council in the late 2000s.
Okay. And that still stands today, correct? Right. Secondly, Mr. Chairman, there are two main issues here that I'm grappling with, and they've been addressed tonight. One of them is drainage, and the other one is traffic. On the drainage piece, Mr. Marone alluded to the fact that...
Mr. Smith?
Yes,
would
sir.
you do me a favor, if possible?
Sure.
I thought you were going to ask something to Ms. Collin, and I have a list of questions that Mr. Dean, that I was going to go through, and I think that may ask some. So if I'd be happy to let you go forward, but if you don't mind, would you let me kind of get it started, and that way we can focus on one issue at a time, traffic, drainage, and the actual building. I think it may help us all get something, but whatever way you want. You have the floor, and I'm not going to take it away from you.
Certainly, we can always come back. Go right ahead.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. Thank you, sir. And, okay. When I look at this, and we had two presentations, and we received a lot of paperwork. But sitting here, I'd like to see something more definite. And I had mentioned to Mr. Marone, and I don't know if he's done it or he has it, so I'm going to ask him. Paul, do you have any PowerPoint that you could put up that I can look at traffic and buildings and things like that? I think that would be very helpful to this council.
Yes. Look to Mr.
Turn Sydney off.
It's done over there. Kill it. It's on.
Mr. Lorino, what you see on the screen now is the overall site plan showing the Medline site with the distances to the various residential areas that I mentioned earlier. It shows I-12 and it shows the connector road.
Okay. Do you have an architectural rendering of this project, of this building?
That is a rendering there provided by Medline.
Okay. Is that a building that's in operation somewhere else right now?
That is yes, and that is the prototype for these buildings, these type facilities for Medline.
Okay. And if I'm not mistaken, you said that the building proposed is 40 feet high, is that correct?
That is correct, yes, sir.
And how high is that building?
40 feet high.
40 feet, so that's
Yes.
what we're looking at?
Yes, sir.
Okay. It's going to be constructed on a concrete slab, right?
That is correct.
What is the actual, we received a lot of emails, I know I have, and good questions and good concerns from residents. Is it 1 million, 2 million? What is the actual footprint, if you could give it to us, of the proposed project?
I'm going to back up. So what you see there is the site. That is the building that is proposed. That building is 800,000 square feet. And that shows the access roads. It also shows the truck bays. If the facility is ever expanded, which I mentioned earlier, it can be expanded to 1 million square feet. That would be 10 to 12 years down the road, as I said earlier, if at all. And that's what the facility would look like at that point in time. That is the 1 million square foot facility, and that's the 800,000 square foot facility.
Okay, but let me ask you a question. You cut the zoning down, so is this the one that it's proposed for now?
That's correct. What you see there is consistent with the amendment that I made. If you look to the top or the north of that, you see that pie-shaped piece of woodlands. That is what was excluded based on my amendment this evening.
Okay. You talked about buffer zones.
Excuse me?
You talked about buffer zones.
Yes.
What is that? And I'm going to give the other side a chance to talk about this, okay? Okay? Believe me. But I want to get it all out so I can see it in front of my face before I make a vote rather than looking on a piece of paper, okay? That's the purpose of this, okay?
So if you look at this particular slide, the area along I-12, you'll see the more narrow area is 60 feet. As you go east and west, it enlarges to 134 feet. You can also see the green space or the vegetation within the I-12 right-of-way that I mentioned earlier. It is faintly there, but you can see that. On the east side, the green space area is 210 feet, though it narrows as you go north. On the west side, it's over 700 feet. On the north side, it's over 200 feet. Those are the buffers. Also, as you see with the amendment, all of that existing pie-shaped piece that was excluded from the request, is not part of the AML zone. So that entire piece will continue to lie between this facility and the connector road and the roundabout.
A resident sent me something that he thought he could see the facility that you had from his backyard.
So I would go to this slide for that, and I would respectfully suggest that is inaccurate. I don't know where the resident is. The closest residence would be Shady Lakes, which is to the northwest. That is, Shady Lakes how far is Shady Lakes? About a quarter mile. You would have, between that residence, you would have trees, the connector road, which is a 4-lane boulevard, additional trees, and then the buffer zones that I just mentioned. All other residences are even further, and there would be absolutely no sight lines whatsoever that would allow you to see this building.
Okay. Mr. Marone, about the operations. Besides the proposed distribution facility as previously described, is Medline planning to conduct any other operations at this location?
No.
When you say no, would you be willing to put that in a deed restriction if you all so desire? We can't force anything like that.
Yes.
And I'm just asking the
Yes,
question.
we've committed throughout this process on numerous occasions that we would in fact put that into a deed restriction.
Okay. This is very important. Very important.
Yes, sir.
The citizens are concerned about the possibility of toxic materials there or taking, I guess, cleaning it, whatever they do. I don't know the whole operation of Medline. But that is something that they're concerned about, and I'm concerned about that, quite frankly, also. And I know other members are. Will they be doing that at that site?
Absolutely not. Medline does not have any plans, and we will deed restrict. If in fact AML allows it, which I would argue that it doesn't, we will deed restrict to prohibit that. Medline does not, in the rare instances where they do their own sterilization, and that's rare, most of that is outsourced at other locations. They have an independent facility that does that. They do not do that within their distribution facilities, and they will not do that at this facility. And we will deed restrict against that.
Okay. Another concern that they shared with me, because I read all of those, noise. What about the noise? What about the noise of the trucks and things like that? Talk a little bit.
So with regards to the noise, twofold. One, the building, the facility itself generates no noise. Nothing at all takes place outside. With regards to the trucks, as you have in your packet, and which I can show on the screen, the fleet of the trucks that they have, the largest is a single axle truck which will carry nothing but medical supplies. So if we go back to our site plan, and you can see the routes of where those trucks could be, the only place that they directly pass residences would be on the Shady Lakes area. But I would submit to you that you've got a 4-lane boulevard there to carry traffic, and that the noise from these trucks would not have any material effect on that. And we've proposed a remedy to that in our proposed contribution.
So it's very important also, this is the same thing that you provided us up here.
That is yes, that's the exact same thing.
I just want to make sure of that.
That's correct.
Okay,
That's correct.
thank you. It just makes it a little easier for us to see. Is there a plan for future expansion of the facility of any of the surrounding acreage?
There is not.
There is not. Okay, all right. Let's talk about I'm very confused on, we talk about trucks and trips and things get discombobulated.
Mm-hmm.
Let's look at the trucks first. Mm-hmm. Will you be using 18-wheelers, 14-wheelers? What is the actual?
The largest truck in the Medline fleet is a single axle, which I think is actually a 16-wheeler. And that is the largest truck that is in their fleet.
Okay. So that will not be your normal 18-wheel lengthwise? I'm not talking about tires.
No, that's what you said. No, it's not. It's
okay,
not.
Okay. Excuse me.
It's not the typical 18-wheeler lengthwise or weight-wise or capacity-wise.
Okay. Okay. And they can talk about that for me. But do you have a diagram of how the trucks are going to get there? Something that we have in here. I didn't look at my.
I do not have a diagram.
Okay.
I did do my
That's
best
fine.
to try to explain that. I can do that again if you would like, but we do not have a diagram to that effect.
Okay. Would Medline consider delaying or be forced to delay the start of their operations if the access road is not completed and finished when the site is constructed?
I do not believe that they would be in a position to do that. I know the access road, though, is quite important to them. But I know that they have obligations that have them on a timeline, and I do not believe that they're in a position to delay beyond that.
Okay. You touched on it, but I'm going to ask you again. Are there certain times of day and night that the oversized vehicles would not use the facility?
During peak times.
Okay.
During peak times, you would not have not just oversized vehicles, but there would be no traffic, basically, that would be during the morning peak or the evening peak. Most of the inbound trips would be in the afternoons or in the early mornings. The outbounds, most of them are all in the early mornings, well before peak.
Okay. Would that be in a deed restriction if you all saw fit to put that in there?
I don't think that we can't put that in a deed restriction because of the need. If there is an emergency with this type of facility, they would have to be in a position to respond to that. Being their clientele or hospitals, nursing homes, and so forth. So if there is a need, they would need to have the ability to respond to that. They do have the ability to program their trucks. They do that all over the country. They design their business to stay off peak, and they will do that in this location.
Okay. 1077 is a major concern of mine, and a lot of people in here and a lot of people in the council. Would there be a need for any of these oversized trucks to travel on 1077 and to use the roundabout near Hannon High School?
As I mentioned before, they will utilize 1077. They will utilize 1077 inbound, but there will be no need for an inbound vehicle to travel to the roundabout. There is a dedicated turn lane that will allow them to access the connector road without the need of going north. In addition, the only time that you would need to have a vehicle coming from this facility to go to that roundabout on 1077 and 1085 would be if they were outbound. And right now, as you are maybe aware, there is no left turn at that intersection of the connector road and Highway 1077. Because of that, Medline has committed that all of their outbound trucks will go east until there is an approved and constructed allowable left turn at that intersection. So they will not put any trucks on 1077, large trucks on 1077 to go to the roundabout.
Going to the roundabout?
Correct.
Okay, and once again, I can't say this, but I'm going to keep saying it, and it's up to you all. Would that be something that would be included in the deed restriction?
I can discuss that with
And I know,
Medline.
remember, we come back again next
Right,
month.
right. I can discuss that
okay.
with Medline.
Okay, good, okay. Okay, I'm going to go to drainage for a couple of things.
Sure.
What is the drainage plan for this? I know you went over it in, well, you don't have to, I guess. You went over that in detail. Would you all consider porous concrete for the massive amount of concrete that's there?
We did consider porous concrete. Medline checked into that as a possibility. Unfortunately, porous concrete does not have the same strength for the type of vehicles that would be here. In addition, they do not have anything beyond a one-year warranty. So unfortunately, porous concrete for this type of facility is not a viable option, but they did check into it to see if it was a possibility.
Okay. Someone also sent me that when they think that when the slab is laid, the concrete is laid, it's going to be higher than the other subdivision, and they're concerned about the water running down. Would you address that?
Well, I don't know why they would believe that. I mean, there is, first of all, there is no subdivision that abuts us. So there is the water that is going to come from this site is all going to be directed into the existing drainage and retention system, which is to the east of this site. So we have no concern whatsoever, and we can state emphatically, and our drainage plan will indicate and prove that at the appropriate time, that no water from this site will be a problem to any of the surrounding neighborhoods that are well away from this site.
Okay. And I'm assuming that Medline would use the retention ponds that are being utilized by subdivisions in that area now?
That's some of those ponds. All of those ponds are part of an interconnected system that were constructed by and maintained by the Wainers. And yes, they would be part of, those ponds would be part of that system. They would enter ponds that are immediately to the east of this site. There is ponds there now, and that is the location of the additional 25 acre-feet of storage that I mentioned prior.
Okay. And have you all looked at the latest FEMA flood plan and figured out and calculated that?
We
I know
have.
that all comes in when you do, but I'm just asking those questions.
Normally, we don't at this stage, as
Right.
you know, but in this instance, because of the nature of this project, we have looked at that. We are aware of those, and our engineers have run all of those calculations, yes.
Okay. That's really all the ones that I have. Thank you, Paul. I know some other councilmen on the list here in one other line. Yeah, just hold on one second, Mr. Long. Thank you, Paul. But I've asked a lot of questions, so I'm going to ask Mr. Lowen if you want to come up and comment on a few of those, sir.
Sure, thank you. Can I close this, Paul? Well, that's a good list of questions, so let's just get into some of them. The footprint that we saw was, let's make it clear, I didn't see any parking lots up there, so it's really larger. You've got to park the trucks somewhere. Employees have to park somewhere.
Mr. Moreno, would you put that back on the...
Here it goes. There you go.
Paul, would you put it back up for us, please? I know this is a little unorthodox, but I think this is a very important issue, and it should be vetted out properly.
Just let me know, or if you want to go to someplace, just let me know. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Which slide did you want to see?
That's fine. Right, good. Did you want to see a slide?
There's the facility.
He's okay. He just wanted to have it up there in case we need it.
Okay, that's good.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
All right, appreciate it.
Yes, sir, go ahead.
So either way, it's a massive facility, but I just want you to recognize that there's parking in addition to the actual facility itself. And look, green space is not the issue. I'm sure whatever they build, it'll look nice, they'll have green space. The issue is traffic. The issue is drainage. The issue is trucks going in and out, property values. It's not green space. I'm sure they'll do what they can to eliminate that. I don't think they're a bad corporate citizen. It's just that this is the wrong place for them to be. Now, let's talk about the trucks a little bit. We have some pictures in our exhibits that show their trucks. And we have a picture that shows just a 10-wheeler, not even as big as the 14 that they have, next to an 18-wheeler. It's the same thing. Might be a little bit shorter, same width, same height, basically. And those pictures were taken locally. Those were trucks that went in and out. I saw some today. I drive 1077 all the time. I saw one of their big tandem trucks, or truck and trailer, heading out. It's not just a small little single axle truck. So the trucks are big, and you can look at some of the pictures we have in there. As far as deed restrictions go, I think Nancy is going to address that some for you, but I've told you about who's going to enforce those. How are you going to be sure that that works? And is the parish going to take on that responsibility of enforcing those deed restrictions? And what if Medline sells it? You don't even know who's going to buy it after that. So I just tell you that's just wrought with problems. As far as the volume of traffic coming in and what roads they use, Medline might be able to some extent to control their own people. But can they control the contractors coming in? Can they control them going out? What if a truck is delayed because there's a wreck and they can't get in? What if there's an emergency, as Mr. Marone said? There are all kind of possibilities that are going to happen. You can't predict when trucks are going to be late or not, and I just suggest to you that trying to say that you can't use this road during this time is a disaster waiting to happen. Also, I want to point out that he mentioned that 1077 we use for no outbound, but would be used for inbound. I think that's what the suggestion was. If you did use it outbound, as you suggested, Mr. Loreno, you have to go up to the circle by the Coquille Sports Complex, go around Hannah High School, come back down, and then get on the interstate. The traffic in there is already atrocious. It's just a short way, and I travel that every day. That traffic backs up many times throughout the day. But even worse, when you want to get off the interstate, if you're traveling west on I-10 and you want to get off on 1077, that traffic many, many times has backed up not just to the exit ramp, but onto the interstate at least a quarter or half a mile. I've come over the overpass and cars are stopped. I thought there was a wreck. It's that they're trying to get off onto 1077 and they're backed up all the way onto the interstate. We try to get over on the shoulder and let people pass, but that is another death trap that's waiting to happen if it hasn't already. As far as drainage goes and the height of the land, our map showed you, and we have some more exhibits in here, that Shady Oaks and the areas around are 19 feet or so. This property is going to be 23 feet. That water, some of it will go into their retention ponds, but if you have a 100-year flood or some serious floods like we've had, there is no way you're going to control that water, not a chance. And where's it going to go? Back into the residences all around them, over to Forest Manor oxidation ponds, and spill over into the Forest Manor Hospital and nursing home. So you've really got a serious problem there for drainage and for traffic. And one last thing, I'm not sure why Mr. Morone didn't use these slides in his direct, because they are helpful, but I just find it curious why he just saved them for questions. But anyway, I'll only turn this over to Ms. Wagner. Thank you.
Hi, Nancy Wagner, President, Flower State Civic Association. I want to thank a lot of you met with us, a lot of our teams. I just want to take just a second and thank you for the time so many of you spent, so many council members were so willing to spend. And for those of us who thanked us for driving to Slidell, it was fun. So thank you. A couple comments on the questions that you asked, Paul. The footprint of the building as shown up there. The information that we got as to the sizing was what was supplied by their permit to the Corps. So the amounts of concrete, like the 46 acres of concrete, are in their application. And the clerk has a complete set of documents and has both the amended application and the original application. The footprint of the building, when it built up to 1 million square feet, plus all of the parking surrounding, is the equivalent of 6 superdomes of impervious concrete. 6 superdomes. It's larger than the new airport at New Orleans Airport Terminal. Larger than that, just the building alone. In terms of traffic, you're talking about how they're promising not to use the roundabout at Hannon. Well, for the trucks they control, that's one thing. But one of the reasons were stated, and I believe it was at the community meeting, that they wanted this location was because it was so close to FedEx, where they get drop shipments from FedEx. So if you look at the map, and, well, you probably know where FedEx is, up 1077. So it won't just be the same number of deliveries being made by FedEx going up around that roundabout to the existing location. It will be multiple times more FedEx drop shipment trucks going around the roundabout, because that's where they're going to go from 1077, 1085 to get to this proposed location. And in terms of the operations and during what hours, you will see in your exhibit booklets, you have an exhibit which I wrote, and it's called Differing Statements as to Truck Types, Numbers, and Routing, because so many different statements have been made about when the trucks will run and where they will go and where they will use for access, that it's really, really hard to say what statements really do rule. And one thing that's particularly troublesome was all the different times that people have said about when the trucks would run. One statement was, oh, don't worry, the trucks will only run from 2 a.m. to 5 a.m. Why would you have a regional distribution center and only run trucks 3 hours? And another statement was made by Mr. Josh Weiner that the facility would operate only from 5 a.m. to 7 p.m. and only on weekdays. So I would ask Mr. Lorino, if you could include your question to them, is this a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week operation, which is their standard? And may I say one more thing about the reason that we would say that they're going to build 23 feet for this structure is because what they put in their core application, because they need to be that far high above the floodplain. So they're going to build to 23 feet. And if you look also in your booklets, you'll have the statement by Don Allette, who is out of town, but he is a retired Army Corps of Engineer, water expert, hydrologist, and he has made his professional opinion statement in there that due to the low point of this location, that where that in a certain rain event, and he's the hydrologist, not me, but you have it in your packet, that water will not be able to be contained to flow only to the east. And I will sit down now. Thank you.
Couple points. So my name's Dr. Ryan Green. I live at 14488 Lake Tahoe Drive. I live 1,320 feet from the proposed site. I'm in Shady Lake Estates. Way back in July, Mr. Dean and I had a conversation about the connector road, having no idea that this facility was going to go in. So I feel like I have been involved in every conversation, met with some of you, talked with some of you. Yes, sir. I will get to it, Mr. Chairman. Yes, sir. We've talked about what is going to happen once the facility is up and running. We have not talked about during the construction phase, pre-operation, what is going to happen to this area. The trucks will only be able to use construction when they come in and scoop everything out, when they haul away, when they bring in. They're only going to be able to use Oxner Boulevard to go to Highway 21, Oxner Boulevard to go to 1085, go in front of Shady Lake Estates and everything on there, out to 1077 by Hannon High School. There's no other way, there's no connector road, and I'm very, very curious as to if that connector road would even be built when construction would start. I would have to say no. There is a 1 million square foot facility in New York that is also that I think we need to be aware of the numbers on those. During the construction phase of this 1 million square foot facility, during the construction, not even operation.
To talk about, other council member will bring up the construction.
Okay.
We'll discuss that at that time.
Flooding. I do live at Shady Lake Estates, okay? I'm at 20.2 feet, okay? If I'm here and Medline is here and the water comes in, it's coming in my backyard. It's coming to all of our residents' backyard. So it's in your packet. For 1 inch of rain, there's 1.2 gallons of runoff. Okay, how often do we just have 1 inch of rain? Not very often. Okay, so we have a tremendous amount of runoff, and I challenge the engineers to try to control Mother Nature in that aspect. It's just not going to happen. One other thing we talk about with this zoning, AM and L. If it's not Medline in that area, then who? I grew up in New Jersey, not here, I'm going to be brief. This is the perfect example. We had a similar situation where I grew up, and the company came in and built and put deed restrictions that they were not going to manufacture anything. We're going to contain all the contaminants. Well, nobody policed it. Nobody enforced it. We had a large incident of cancer in my town, Exhibit A, okay? I do not want to go through that. Again, I understand they said they're not going to do that, but if they decide to leave and somebody else comes in, again, we've said this, who is going to enforce that? Who is going to protect these residents? I went through it once. I don't want my children to go through it again.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Okay, thank you. Mr. Smith, we'll go back to you after I went a long way and had a lot of answers, but you go right ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll try and be as brief as I can.
You take your time.
But I want to, at this time, because there's a question that I need some clarification on, and I hope it'll help everybody else as well. And that comes down to, at the end of the day, when the developer has done what he wants to do and the residents have done what they need to do, or either they have to live with whatever happens, somebody's going to have to enforce and maintain what we wind up with. And so I'd like to, if it's okay with you, Mr. Chairman, ask our parish engineer if I could ask him a few questions as it relates to drainage. Thank you, Jay. Very briefly, the developer mentioned that they have enhanced their runoff capacity, the reduction in their runoff beyond our 25% requirement to 30% requirement. If you've had an opportunity to look at that and analyze that new offering that he's giving, that they're giving, if that's the case, we understand that that's going to handle the runoff to the immediate adjacent properties. But what about in the given rain event, that water that's going to leave that location and go through our tributary to finally wind up in the Chifuncta, I would guess? Can you answer that for me? Is it going to adequately handle a significant rain runoff?
So what I can say is, so our current ordinance requires that they reduce the peak post-development runoff by 25% of what the pre-development runoff rate is.
Right.
And I've heard them say that they would be willing to go above and beyond what our current ordinances require, the 25% reduction, and provide a 30% reduction. We haven't had any engineered plans submitted to our department. We haven't had a permit submitted, so there's nothing that we've reviewed to show us, where they're proposing to have ponds for detention, to provide the detention, to meet the ordinance requirements. But, so really all I can tell you at this point in time is when we get the design plans for the building, we'd make sure that it's in compliance with all the traffic requirements, it's in compliance with the drainage requirements, and it's in compliance with the fill requirements.
That we currently have on the books?
That we currently have, yes.
Okay. And so the process, I think that you spoke to earlier, Mr. Chairman, and had called in to explain to us, it's going to put us in a after-the-fact position. So what we're considering here tonight is coming from the developer's point of view and the resident's point of view, and that's what we have to make a decision on. That's unfortunate. It is very unfortunate. Shifting gears right quick, from drainage to traffic. Have you had an opportunity to, or can you tell us rather, when the 1077 extension is going to be complete?
So we haven't put it out to bid yet. We haven't finished everything that we need to do with the plans, getting the DOTD permit, just wrapping up things to put it out to bid. But once we put it out to bid and have a contractor, we're expecting construction to take around 16 months. 16 months? 16 months.
Okay. Okay.
And we hope to put it out to bid in like the first quarter of next year.
Okay, so that would facilitate their outbound ingress and egress to then be, as Mr. Marone stated, they'll be able to use that for their outbound. Inbound? Inbound, okay. 16 months. Secondly, so in the meantime, they'll have to use Highway 21.
Right. Yeah, the connector road's not constructed yet.
Oshner Boulevard to get to Highway 21.
I don't know where, it looks like they would have a proposed connection just south of the roundabout at the westernmost point of Oshner Boulevard that would take them to 21.
So have you had an opportunity to look at any traffic studies that?
We haven't had anything formally submitted to engineering department for us to review. All of the engineered plans and the studies that go along with it happen after the zoning has taken place.
Okay. I'm going to pause right there and give somebody else a chance.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jay.
Mr. Smith.
Yep.
Ms. O'Brien.
Yeah, well, I want to thank everybody for being so gracious tonight. I want to thank everybody for coming, and we got some very detailed emails and phone calls, and I certainly appreciate that. Met with people from both sides, so I do appreciate that, but this is going to be like the LSU-Alabama game. Some people are not going to be happy, and some people will. So we want to do as much due diligence as possible, and I know I've spent hours and hours on this. One of the things that has been brought up repeatedly has been site selection. And I'm understanding that people repeatedly ask, why there? Why don't you go to Slidell? Why don't you go to 1088? I want to ask the question, why there, and is there any other option? I already know the answer, but I want it on the record. I want to understand, because people genuinely want to keep Medline here, but they have concerns about this specific location. So I want some more clarity on that. Basically, I want to know, is it here? And then your second choice, as I understand, your second favorite choice is actually outside of St. Tammany Parish. Can you elaborate on that just a little bit for us, please?
Thank you for the question, ma'am. Yes,
We've had multiple locations. We had a Plan B and Plan C sites as well. We've been working on this now for 8-9 months. Just through this process and many months before, we've been at this location for 15 years. We love this location. It works for many, many reasons. We've looked at over 50 different sites. I've been doing this for 30 years. And this location is the only location that works in St. Tammany Parish. Believe it or not, this is no fun going through this process. And if we've had another facility in St. Tammany that worked for us in a parish that we love to be part of, that we've been part of for the last 15 years, we would have selected and purchased it. But this facility, this location is the only one that works, and we're literally on the other side of the highway today in the 200,000 square footer. So we are right at that location, just on the other side of 12.
So basically, it's this one, or it goes outside St. Tammany? May I ask, I don't know if you feel it's appropriate, I'm just curious.
Yes, ma'am.
Where are some other locations that you're considering?
They're along I-12, but not in this parish, and they're further west.
Okay. I wanted to,
Yes, sir.
Oh,
Yes, I apologize. Dimitri Duke, and I'm Vice President of Real Estate Facilities and Operations for Security Operations for Medline Industries.
okay.
Thanks, sir. I apologize.
Okay, that's what I wanted to clarify if that was even an option to go somewhere else. I had understood that that was not.
Not in St. Tammany, ma'am.
Okay. I wanted to ask a question, and thank you so much.
Sure.
Okay.
Oh.
I wanted to ask, since it was brought up, and certainly we don't enforce it, but there's been discussions about deed restrictions. And I want to ask our attorneys, are deed restrictions legally binding contracts? Yes or no? One of our attorneys.
They are legally binding on the parties that are a party to the deed restriction. St. Tammany Parish is generally not a party to deed restrictions, and you should not consider deed restrictions when making your decision. The question in front of you is, should the zoning map at the site be changed from PBC2 to AML?
Okay, thank you. The other thing I wanted to ask was about control of the traffic. If I understood correctly in meeting, I know Medline can control their trucks, but they can't control their vendors. It's my understanding, if I recall correctly, that 50% of the trucks going in and out are Medline trucks currently. What percentage will change if you are indeed allowed to build this building? How will that differ, increase, decrease? I would imagine your trucks would increase with your line or your fleet. Can you tell us the difference and what amount of traffic you would be able to control once it's built, if you get approval?
Yes, ma'am. So nationally, we're averaging about 65 to 70% of all truck traffic inbound and outbound being Medline employees, Medline trucks. Currently, we're less than that because the facility is 200,000 square feet today. In this facility, our goal to be about 80% once we're up and running. And we will control 80% of the traffic. The remainder is mostly with a few select vendors. The largest of them, 80 to 90%, is FedEx, who is our global partner. And we can absolutely, I cannot say we control FedEx and how, where, and they deliver from, but we can absolutely have that discussion with them. And, you know, we've been here for the 15 years. They're delivering currently into our facility of 12 and 1077. And so we'll continue to work with them to minimize their impact on the community.
Okay, so we're talking about the percentage. How many, what number of outside vendors do you have currently?
So today we probably have about 3 to 5 vendors.
Okay. Let me see.
And I do want to say, out of those trucks today, 60% of them are the single axle 16, 18-wheeler trucks you guys are referring to. And the rest of them are single, the straight trucks, the smaller trucks, and the vans as well.
Let me ask you a question. I think Mr. Marone may have covered it, but I want to make sure I understand correctly.
Yes, ma'am.
Anywhere in the United States, anywhere
Yes, ma'am.
in the United States, is there a distribution center that has manufacturing right on the side of it, next to it, part of the building, anywhere?
No, Medline Industries?
Yes, sir.
No, ma'am, no.
Okay. When you're building this, you're wanting to build this for 800 square feet. How much are you going to, 800,000
Yes.
square feet? How much of it do you anticipate using initially?
Day one, we'll be using about 300,000 to 400,000 square feet.
May I ask a question, why you're building such a large building?
Because we have 160 facilities worldwide, about 40 million square feet. We have close to 14 facilities that we're in the process of building or designed to build across the United States today. We're part of healthcare, and these facilities, we own them free and clear. We're a fourth-generation family-owned business out of Chicago that's been around since 1910. And this facility, we plan on being here forever. And it's very expensive and very costly to move these facilities with all the infrastructure and technology that's built into them. We want to be here for the next 50 years. So we looked at the growth today, the usage today, and capacity to grow for the next 50 years, and we designed it accordingly. That's why we're building 800,000, expandable to 1 million in the future.
So you anticipate to grow into 800,000?
Yes, ma'am.
In how many years? Just, and I know there's no hard
10 to
figure.
12 years.
10 to 12.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Mr. O'Brien, could I address?
No, sir. Ms. O'Brien, go ahead. Unless Ms. O'Brien, Ms.
Well,
O'Brien
in
can
a sense
answer
of fairness, I
questions.
would like for him to address
Sure,
my questions, just to be fair.
Sure.
Thank you. I won't take long.
No, she has to ask you to do that, though. That's
Okay,
what
I appreciate it. On the alternate sites, we of course would like Medline to look for some. I'm not sure what their rationale is, I can't control it. But the other sites already have the infrastructure there, utilities are there, the interstate's there, it's cleared, it's raised, no flooding issues. Highway 1077, 1088, I'm sorry, 1088. 434 is about the same way. I know that Weyerhaeuser has some property they were looking at already, and they did opt for this other area, but it doesn't have the problems that this Ochsner extension does. And the Slidell Mall, over there in Slidell, it's already concreted. It's right on the interstate. They would love to have something there. I'm not sure why they don't want those sites. They seem to be much easier to me, but whatever the answer would be, whether they're just saying that to try and get you to force fit this, which again, I think is spot zoning, whether it's that or not, I think there's one thing that they can't ask us to do, and they can't ask us to hold the public welfare hostage just because they want to have a particular site, which to me doesn't really make that much sense. So I think when it comes down to you having to decide, do you go with their private interest or do you go with the public interest? I think you have to go with the public interest, and I've given you the law to say that. And one last thing, I always tell my clients, you don't want to be in court.
Well, my question was, as a company, because we as a government do not have the authority or the right to tell them where they should ask to go.
I understand that.
So my question of the gentleman was, are they considering anywhere else? And apparently the answer is no.
Well, they say they're not. I know they were already considering the Weyerhaeuser site on 434.
We understand it, we've heard it,
But-
thank you very much.
But either way, the point is they just can't hold us hostage.
We understand that,
Okay,
thank you very
you.
much. Mr. Groby?
I'm going to go off a little bit something. We had, I believe, the Director of the Economic Development, St. Tammany Corp. here. He'd spoken earlier. It isn't so much a question to the body, is that, in an email he graciously provided me, speaking about any proposed pilot agreement. A pilot agreement, for those who don't know, is payment in lieu of taxes. In my council district and in Mr. Stefanski's council district, we have the Lacombe Distribution Center. That is a 20-year pilot agreement. They are good corporate neighbors. I have no complaints so much about them, except that it has changed dramatically since it was first founded. As you know, it was considered the Folgers' secondary warehouse out of their roasting plant out of New Orleans. Then the J.M. Smuckers Corporation bought Folgers out. And now there's a German corporation that bought that particular site. I don't remember the name of it. I have it in my records. So they are still benefiting of a pilot agreement, which means payment in lieu of taxes. They are paying under the agreement about $77,000 to $78,000 to the fire department, Fire District 3, which needs the money. And they are also giving a generous donation of about $17,000 to Recreation District 4. As far as I understand, they are paying no other taxes to the district. According to the email from the St. Tammany Corp., this facility would be considered a prime candidate for Louisiana economic development. Basically, the state would give them about $500,000 to put in the roads and drainage. After that part is done, then the St. Tammany Corporation would come in possibly with a pilot agreement. The concerns that I have, we're all talking about the future here. What is it going to impact St. Tammany, the residents, the highway, everything? The concerns that I have, great company, I've looked them up, I did a lot of research. They're going to impact about 300 jobs, so they say. That's $18 million, I believe you said, in generate payroll. I don't know how much is that local. I'm sure the truck drivers don't all live here, but what I'm concerned about is that if they get a pilot agreement, this body does not have a say in the matter. We don't even see the agreement. This body had no idea that there was a 20-year pilot agreement given to the Lacombe distribution system. 20 years. They still are not paying taxes. I believe they have about 3 more years to go, maybe. They up to 118 jobs there, which is great. Hopefully, most of them are in St. Tammany. As the gentleman explained to me in a long phone conversation last week, they cannot require jobs to be in St. Tammany. It is against the law. What I am concerned about, if whatever pilot agreement, if one takes place, should this facility be approved, that these are some of the local taxing bodies that will not collect money. Stark, which is St. Tammany Special Needs Citizens, the school board, COAST, which is Council on Aging St. Tammany, the Distribution Maintenance Fund, and that's important, and I'm going to close on this. In my district, I had to spend $50,000 last year closing in ditches because the trucks coming out of the Lacombe Distribution Center could not follow a no truck route sign. They kept getting stuck at Crental Road and Fish Hatchery. We had to keep towing them out. They may have been ticketed. We put signs up. The only way to fix this, and Shannon Davis worked with me, we had to close in the corner ditches on both. I'm hoping that Marty never has to spend money out of his fund to fix anything like this. But this is the risk we take. And the issue is that I am deeply concerned, depending on what pilot agreement may happen in the future, how our taxing bodies, because this will be money we don't collect. It doesn't come out of your pocket more, we just don't collect it and where we're supposed to. But it also causes the taxing bodies to spread their required load over the taxpayers they are able to collect from. So this body needs to take that in consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Taladano?
Thank you very much, Mr. Warren. A lot of the questions that I had have either been answered by the gentleman from the company or from the opposition. But I want to be absolutely certain about something for the record. And I'll direct this to Mr. Marone, if you would, if you'll take the, so that it is totally clear going forward, as I appreciate it, you will, by restrictive covenant, if I look at the record for AML, Advanced Manufacturing and Logistic District, I see the vast majority of these things as being deleted and will be not a part of your property zone no matter what, and I'm going to call them off for the record. 1, aeronautics and aerospace research, development, manufacture will not occur. Is that right, Paul?
That is correct.
2, automotive research, development, and manufacture will not occur, correct?
Correct.
Durable goods manufacturing will not occur.
Correct.
Food product processing and manufacture will not occur.
Correct.
Furniture manufacture will not occur.
That's correct.
Garment manufacture will not occur.
Correct.
Glass, plastic, paint research, development, and manufacture, will not occur.
Correct.
Hydraulic and robotics research, development, and manufacture will not occur.
Correct.
Pharmaceutical and medical research, development, and manufacture will not occur.
Correct.
A very nice lady in the audience alluded to some concerns, chemical spillage, emissions, so forth and so on. As I understand it, in addition to these things, so that we don't bog down in semantics, there will be no sterilization operations in this facility whatsoever. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Software development and programming will not occur. Excuse me, maybe I misread that.
Yes, we would not restrict software development and programming.
No, and by scientific research and development services, what is your intention with regard to that?
That would be allowed, but again, no sterilization or any process similar to that would be permitted.
And of course, you will have general offices and services on the premises.
That
Is
would be
correct?
allowed, yes.
Okay. Is there anything else that stay with me, please?
Yes.
Is there anything else that I have not made mention of that would not be allowed in your facility that would otherwise be allowed?
We also agreed to restrict some of the administrative uses, utility substation, wastewater treatment facilities, and utility distribution facilities.
Yeah.
Those will also be prohibited.
Yeah. And for the benefit of the audience, for those who are not familiar with how this is handled, these will be covenants running with the land. Is that correct?
That is correct.
All right. My next question is, some of these people, including, I believe, Dr. Green, are residents of Shady Lakes. If we look at the diagrams, that would appear to be the closest proximity either to the facility or in particular to the intended new road, correct?
That is correct.
All right. And I understand that you have offered up, on behalf of your client, a $500,000 investment in the soundproofing that area. Is that correct?
That's correct. A donation to the parish for noise abatement in that area, yes.
Do you have any thoughts about the specifics of how that would occur? What would be your intention? How would that be done? I don't think, for instance, you couldn't build a sound wall for $500,000, but what would be your intention? But first, let me ask this question, and I interrupt you. About how much footage is affected by the Shady Lakes proximity to the road?
I can't give you an exact footage. We see it there on the aerial. I don't know the exact linear footage. And as far as the exact abatement that would be utilized, I'm not in a position to say. Whatever the engineers believe would be best, we're not going to try to dictate what that would be. As a layman, it would appear to me that some of the noise abatement that you see along some of the roadways, not the concrete, but what you see is maybe those slatted type facilities, which I think are a bit more economical and, as I understand, service the same purpose. I would say again, though, we are prepared, or Medline is prepared, to make that contribution toward whatever is the best solution in that area.
And you'll yield to our engineers, I
Correct,
presume.
absolutely.
Okay. I think that's the only questions I have for the moment.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Bender.
Mr. Lorino, Ms. Nancy had a...
No, we're going Mr. Bender. Mr. Bender, go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to say to the people on both sides of this issue, I'm going to take my questioning and comments into a little bit different direction, okay? Because I think it's important. The time we've spent on the direction we're in has been important, and I've been listening very, very closely. But I want to talk about economic development. And I do understand that comments have been made that there are other sites, including by Mr. Lowen. Am I pronouncing that right, sir?
Yeah, like Lowen.
Lowen, yes. There are other sites that can be selected. To play devil's advocate on this, but what Mr. Lowen doesn't know, and it's not his fault, because I don't know it, and none of us in this room know it, except for the gentleman from Medline, is this. What are the criteria that this company has And I worked for a company for 30 years with its own real estate department. We had a vice president of real estate. Their criteria for site selection, and I was involved in Louisiana and Mississippi site selections, was not the easiest thing in the world for the average person, including myself, to fully understand. They have a reason to their badness. And I would just ask by a shake of the head one way or the other, the gentleman, is that fairly accurate?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so one thing I need to take into consideration, and don't think I'm on either side right now. I'm trying to clear up the ifs, the what about this? Because we've been talking about traffic, we've been talking about drainage, and Jay Watson, our chief engineer, correctly has told us, which we all up here know, that that's at the planning stage. So to be clear, in Jay or Sydney or our attorneys can shake their head, none of this can go forward even if zoning is approved. Correct me if I'm wrong, without getting through the planning, the engineering, the drainage, the traffic analysis stage. Is that accurate? Okay, that's a yes. That's important. I'm not going to answer the questions from people in the audience, okay? I'd like to, I really would, but then we would never get out of here. But my point is, I know we're on a zoning issue, but I think the chair has been absolutely correct and accurate at letting us expand into these other questions, because this is a big deal. Economic development. I had an opponent this time in all of the forums, and I attended all of them. They gave us questionnaires in advance. Well-known organizations, the League of Women Voters, the Alliance for Good Government, and in the case of my party, RPEC. And my recollection is, I know one I wrote a rather long answer to, because it was a detailed question. How are you, as a councilman, if reelected, how are you going to impact economic development in St. Tammany Parish? That's a question that's legitimate. Those organizations that asked it are legitimate. They've been around for a long time, the Alliance and the League of Women Voters. When the comment of the gentleman from Medline is that we would have to go west, there was a lot of clapping. That means that as a parish, we don't want Medline at all? No. I understand you want to protect where you're at. Mr. Chairman, I understand. I'm simply making the point that going west means they're out of St. Tammany Parish. I understand that. But we have to consider in the equation, because 200,000 plus people want us to consider economic development, jobs that allow our children and grandchildren to stay in St. Tammany Parish.
Okay, please, everybody's been very quiet. Let's please move on. Go ahead, Jerry.
So I'm simply trying to balance the scale of why are we here? We're here because a company with a long-term reputation, and I didn't know how many millions of square feet and how many countries they're in and so forth, but obviously well established, is talking to our local developers, our local councilmen, now the council as a whole, on how do we locate in St. Tammany Parish. I'm not making a judgment on what particular site. Let me be clear. But it is important that all of us consider economic development. If we're not going to consider that, then we're not being fair to this issue. We might as well not consider any company that comes before us in the future. Listen, you're misunderstanding the point. I'm not talking, oh, well, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to stop my time.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Mr. Stefan.
Excuse me, Mr.
Yes,
Chairman.
sir. Yes, sir.
Mr. Lowen, since you represent this good group of citizens, well, excuse me, since you represent this good group of citizens, I'd like you to answer my questions.
Yes, sir.
So we should not be concerned about keeping a Medline. No, excuse me.
Okay.
Let me finish.
Yes, sir.
We should not be concerned about keeping a Medline or other quality companies from wanting to come to St. Tammany Parish. That's what I'm hearing.
No, sir, that's not, I don't think that's what they're saying. Certainly not what I'm saying.
Did you just hear what I just heard?
Yes, sir, I did.
All right, so you respond to me.
Okay, here's what I think, saying. Let me say this. I certainly respect your opinion. I think you're right. We want businesses to come. I've said that. I'm pro-business. I want Medline here. Want them somewhere. What we're saying is that there's a cost to pay. Do we want our children and our families killed on I-12 because the traffic in the death trap that we have there?
Jerry, we understand where this is at right now. There's opinions going and
I wasn't going to ask any more questions, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, I know, but we've heard the same thing a few times, and that's okay. But I don't need to hear it 4 or 5 times on that. Okay?
Mr. Chairman, I do want to say, and I know I'll draw probably a boo over this, okay? I drove for 40 years from Slidell, from the same home I've lived in, to Elmwood Industrial Park. And believe me, I-12 does not have a license on all accidents on the interstate system.
Of course not.
That's correct.
However, you also just referred to, we don't want to put ourselves and our lives at risk. Every morning I got on the interstate to drive 40 miles to Elmwood, I put my life at risk. Would you not agree?
Oh, I think anytime we get in the car, that's a chance. But that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is we know that we already have problems there, not just traffic, but drainage, property values, all those things we talked about. I can get back into it again. And the question is, are we going to do something that makes it worse? Or are we going to try and find a solution? And as I said, are we going to let them hold us hostage or not? I want them to come.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And Mr. Lowen, if I could just say,
Yes, sir.
that's a fair point that you just made. That's a fair point that you just made.
Thank you, sir.
Would it impact the traffic even worse? That's a more fair point than the interstate, this will start to kill people.
Well, when it gets, we already have people dying. We had a horrible accident out there.
Jerry.
Let me stop, Mr.
Yes,
Chairman.
sir. Thank you, Mr.
But thank you. I do
Mr. Lowen,
understand what you're saying.
Thank you. Steve?
Yes. First of all, I want to thank the 2 ladies that met with me, at least cornered me in Cracker Barrel, and thought I was Gene Belisario, so, and I hope you can understand there's a difference between us when they're there. But I did have a good meeting.
You would have been better looking.
Yeah, I did have a good meeting with them later on, and they presented a lot of the facts that have been presented tonight. So I'm not going to go over those. I think that, and I'm going to ask a couple of people questions. One of them is Chris Massengale. And then, Chris, if you'll come up here, I'd like for you to, first of all, and I'm going to tell you, I've worked with Chris since he got here about 1.5 years ago. And I know that somebody like the mayor of Slidell said, bring it over here and we'll put this in North Shore. That happens to be in my district, and I'm going to tell you, that doesn't make sense at all as a place where they would have to do something. It's, by the way, it's not concrete, it's asphalt. And they would have to tear down the entire North Shore building to be able to accommodate this kind of a thing. And I guess, so we try to use, and I'm going to tell you what I've discussed with Chris, is I found out that the National Finance Center, which most of you probably don't know what it is, but they have 1,200 people employed in eastern New Orleans. They're going to shut down and move somewhere else. They've decided to move it. So I suggested to Chris that they go take a look at it, and he and the mayor and several people got together, and they did present a case to bring that to North Shore Mall. And it was only because they could have the 1,200 parking spaces and that they have the office space there. But Chris has worked on a lot of other projects, and I just want him to, number one, explain to us the process you go through, because I believe that if I understand the way we go, and I've worked with your predecessors, companies come in and look at a place, and then they decide where they want to go. And they normally look at 3 or 4 places. And if you get narrowed down into that bunch, you've got to have a place that's at least ready for what they want to do. And, I mean, is that pretty correct, or how do we go about doing that? And if you don't have it ready, you're not even on the list.
That's correct. Yes, sir, Councilman. As I've mentioned before, and as we've talked about in person with many of you all, particularly in economic development, and I can appreciate other professionals that have maybe dabbled in this from time to time, I will tell you, as your recognized authorized Chief Economic Development Officer, the art and science of site selection is significantly nuanced. It is highly technical. There's a lot of sophistication that goes behind it, and it is always driven by the company with parameters that takes months and sometimes years, with enormous amount of resources that is dedicated to this very scientific process. As Councilman Bender pointed out, the company knows what they're looking at, not 5 and 10 and 15 years. Medline, as you heard from Dimitri, is thinking about this 50 years from now. And part of that consideration is what we call also community filters or indicators. Sometimes there's 5. Sometimes there's 150 various specific indicators that we take months. Us as the local economic developer, Louisiana Economic Development, GNO Inc., the company, through all this process, the due diligence that has taken place behind the scenes for months is significant. And there's no company with the reputation and the global sophistication and resources of Medline Industries would pick a location that did not, one, benefit the long-term economic vitality of a community, their own business, their employees, their customers, and the market. And that is exactly what has happened here. Unfortunately, they're using this as an opportunity to express some frustrations. I respect that. I honor this process. This process is important. We understand that we need to go through this, and we do a lot of due diligence, even when it comes time to talking about pilots. I can't speak to the practices of the past, but what I can speak to now is the best practices in modern 21st economic development, and it is about accountability, it's about due diligence, and it's about transparency. And companies are held accountable for investments that we make to support economic development, and Medline will be held accountable if they choose to access these statutory performance-based support programs.
My next question to you would be...
It's driven about $18 million investing back into this community. It's driven about $9 million of new payroll. The 50 employees that are currently being employed right now, 46% of them live in St. Tammany Parish. We're talking about another 200, another 8 million on top of what Medline has been contributing to this community for 15 years. Last year alone, Medline Industries paid over $4 million in Louisiana sales tax. And that 18 million that I'm quoting you that's in your packet, that all stays in St. Tammany Parish.
Now, think about the investment in infrastructure that we can do with 18 million back into the coffers, supporting the quality of life that is inherent to the fabric of who we are. Economic development and quality of life are not in cross purposes. In fact, what we're doing, it is a pinnacle, because Medline industry, being recognized globally, has said, you know what? St. Tammany Parish is the destination of choice. Because guess what? We have a $10 billion economy in St. Tammany Parish. And let me tell you the top 3 industries that support that economy. Anybody want to take a guess? The first one is healthcare.
Right.
The second one is logistics, transportation, and wholesale trade, supported by the Medline industry that we're recruiting. And for them to say, not only have we been here for 15 years, council people, but we've decided through our sophistication and site selection, we're going to stay and continue to invest and create another 200 jobs and another 299 jobs of direct jobs that support those.
Okay, Steve?
So yes, it's a quality of life, Councilman.
So I think I was going to ask you, what is the recommendation of St. Tammany Corps? But I think I already got that message.
We support it wholeheartedly. And to that point, Councilman, let's talk about those jobs. I've heard emails and information about these are dirty jobs.
Okay.
These are well-paying jobs right here in this community where people can afford to live in this community. These are important
and I understand
jobs.
that, Chris.
7 out of the 10 jobs in St. Tammany Parish make below $10 an hour. Medline, $47,000.
Okay, Steve.
Thank you. I think you've answered that question.
That's why we do economic development.
And I just want to tell
Not because of
everybody
emotion.
I just want to tell everybody here, you know, I spent a lot of time working with a place in my district to get good paying jobs. And they were, you know, you have to have the skills to do it, but the jobs were, there was going to be 90 jobs added at about $100,000 apiece. But they had to have a zoning change. And the neighborhood next to them complained like heck about it. They came to the zoning meeting and everything else. I still believe that what we did to modify a piece of ground there was to add a different 5 acres to their plant. And they said, we want to get this thing locked down because 15 years from now, we're going to need to do some expansion. And even though people complained, what they did when they got the property was they built houses on it for the people who worked there that couldn't afford a place to live in St. Tammany Parish. And I think, to me, that's a good company. And I like to look for good companies that pay decent salaries, not a $10,000 a year salary or something like that. The last thing I wanted to point out was the second place that they talked about this ought to go is up on 434. That also happens to be all of 434 from the interstate to 36 is in my district, except for one patch south, which is in Jake's district for where the hospital is. One of the things that you have up there is you've got a lot of wetlands, and I don't know what they look at wetlands here, but you can't build on them, and it's expensive as heck to convert wetlands. I'm not saying that I know what their criteria is, but normally when a company comes in, they look at it and say, this is a place we want. And oh, by the way, Plan B is we're going to do something else, and Plan C is we're going to do something else. And I think that's what we've heard here tonight. I think that I can understand what Medline is wanting to do. I can understand the people here who are opposed to this and what's going to happen. But I also think that, and as Mr. Bender pointed out, it's very difficult for us to sit up here and talk about drainage issues and traffic issues. That's done after zoning is completed. Whatever happens with zoning, that's all done after it's completed. And then the zoning commission or the planning commission then takes over And once they take over, then the things that Jay was talking about was they'll submit plans and Jay and them will review them to make sure that they meet our criteria. And if they meet our criteria, then he's going to approve them. I assume he would. They've said in one case they would exceed him, but they've got to at least meet him for him to approve it. So I wanted to bring you up mainly to talk about the thing because I believe in economic development, and over in my area, I'm doing everything I can to get jobs over there too. I wish that they would have said to us, we want to come over on the new road you had built, and except that it's not a big enough site for what they want to do, but if we want to come over there and do it there, I'd have welcomed with open arms, because the kind of jobs they're talking about doing would be worthwhile to have. So, thank you. I appreciate your answering my questions.
Thank you for your time. Ms. O'Brien?
One of the things that was shown to us in our packet, and I'd like to bring it up, is I'm trying to reconcile the concern about traffic and numbers with this plan as opposed to what could potentially go there now. Mr. Marone, can you go over those numbers again? Because I want to understand what it's zoned now, if it's built out. I want to understand what the expected traffic count would be compared to what this proposal would be, because you are talking about traffic. It is a concern. I want to look at the numbers of both.
So this is the plan that you're referring to. That is the plan that is in accordance with the PBC2 guidelines. So the traffic under a business park, like you see there, would have at a minimum 4 to 5 times more traffic than would be generated by the Medline facility. The business park of that nature would have at a minimum 3,300 trips per day, whereas the maximum under the Medline facility would be at maximum capacity in 8 years would be no more than 800 trips a day, and those would be off-peak.
Okay,
So the difference is 4 to 5 times at a minimum.
So even if you're wrong half of it, it would still be double.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Dean, I see Mr. Smith is right behind you. Do you want to close, sir?
I want to close, let her
Yes, sir.
go ahead.
Mr. Smith?
And it's just a quick question, and I would like for the representative from Medline, if he could, if I may.
Sure.
I noticed in your website that you talk about community impact grants.
Yes, sir.
For community health centers.
Yes.
And I was really, really encouraged by that information.
Yes.
It says that you are, once again, want to be a good corporate citizen. And so we can expect when Medline, if Medline comes to St. Tammany Parish, that you will be continuing to provide those granting opportunities for some of our 501c3 entities. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Medline is, for the last 12 years, we've been the best healthcare company to work for in the United States. We have a Medline Foundation that is unbelievably active in grants to local non-for-profits and will continue to be so. And obviously here we're going to grow from 200,000 square foot to 800,000 square foot, being able to handle sales not only in the state of Louisiana, all of the state of Louisiana, but also the nearby adjacent other 3 states. So we hope to one day generate over $1 billion in sales out of this facility. And it will further generate impact on the community that we live in.
LEED certified?
Yes, sir. It's a LEED certified facility. It's going to be the best supply chain distribution center in the state of Louisiana.
And finally,
with the solar panels on the roof as well.
Where is your customer located? East, west, here? Where?
Everywhere in the state, sir.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Dean?
Mr. O'Brien, could we address some of your questions?
No, sir. The council, let me be perfectly clear. As I said in the beginning, we're talking about a lot of issues that we didn't we wouldn't have to because it's not under the ordinance. But we do not go back and forth. A council person can ask anyone to come up, and then that's it. It's not a rebuttal, it's a question, just like if they had one for you, you could come up.
I was just
Okay?
asking if she would let me respond.
No, I'm gonna tell you that we're moving on to Mr. Dean. Mr. Dean.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll speak when everybody else stops.
Please.
I got a couple of things. One is, before I start, there's the question about deed restriction. Carlin, would you feel comfortable answering a question about deed restrictions? I understand what happens, because we've used the deed restriction tool, I guess, for lack of a better word, on many, many projects. Let's just say 20 years from now, something happens and they break one of their deed restrictions. I get that people get worried about that. But let's just say, to quote what someone else was saying, what if they sold tomorrow? So I'm Smith Medical Supply Place and I want to go to Medline. I want to buy them. When I go to Medline to purchase them, I'm going to see these deed restrictions, am I not? I'm going to go to the court. I mean, if I'm going to hire an attorney, and then that attorney is going to say, okay, here's what you're buying. You're buying an 800,000, 1 million square foot building, and here are these deed restrictions that go along with that piece of property.
Yeah, to start off with, the council shouldn't consider any deed restrictions in its decision-making process.
I got other attorneys out there.
But
like 16,000.
theoretically, a deed restriction would run with the land. We would not know what the terms of that deed restriction would be, but in a very general sense, deed restrictions run with the land. They may have time limits. I'm unsure of who the parties would be, but a deed restriction should be recorded in the courthouse if it's to be effective as to other parties.
And that's where I'm going with it, is that it doesn't necessarily have to be caught by a neighbor or by someone who's whatever it's affiliated or it's connected to, whatever homeowner association, whatever. It can be caught in case if it's ever sold, the purchaser would catch it.
A responsible purchaser would hopefully do a title search to find if there were deed restrictions.
Okay.
And then the party to enforce it would depend on what the deed restrictions said.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, one more. I got another question. Sydney, I couldn't bypass you. We've talked about Oshner Boulevard. And then if as this thing goes through, if it were approved, there's a lot of truck traffic going up and down Oshner Boulevard. And then you add to that the connector road. Hopefully, possibly at the same time, it's going to be pretty difficult. And I know that's a lot of people's concern, a lot of people, especially in Normandy Oaks and Maison de Lac. Can we or do we request a bond from that company in case they do harm to our road?
The Department of Public Works would set a bond amount based upon the project and the size of the project for the construction portion of the.
So it's a normal practice?
Yeah, but it would just be for the construction. Once the building is completed, the bond is returned, and it would become part of general maintenance.
Okay, that's just okay, all right, I got it. Okay, I don't normally do this. I usually kind of talk off the cuff and kind of talk, but because as this thing started rolling out back in September, and the emails started coming, and they kind of started trickling in, and the voicemails, and immediately out of the gate, and this really disturbs me because as a councilman for this district, I didn't just suddenly stop caring. I didn't just suddenly become political, all right? So as they started coming, it got uglier and uglier and uglier, and just out of the gate. I don't mean just after a couple of months, but out of the gate, it was very ugly, and I think that's really a shame for one thing. I mean, you can sit back and, say whatever, not believe what I say, whatever. I got enough friends. So I'm just telling you that as the district councilman for this area, I didn't just stop caring, and I'm going to tell you why. I typed this up, and I want to read this aloud. Y'all have had 2.5 hours to talk. I'm gonna have about 10 minutes, if you don't mind. I want to discuss the development over the parish over the past 15 to 20 years. As some of you remember, a few years ago, only 20 or 25 years ago, this was a very rural parish, using the same north-south roads. All we did to them, we couldn't make them much wider, so we just kind of expanded as much as we possibly could. 15 years ago, Highway 21 was 2-lane, all right? We didn't need any more. Okay, it went in and out of Covington, everything was fine. We began seeing the development, specifically residential, about 15 years ago, and the majority of it was in the western side of the parish, specifically District 1. As a result of the census, the 2010 census, District 1 was shown to have, I think all the other districts had about 16,000, 14,000. We had 26,000. We had to shift the whole districts to the east in order to kind of decrease and make everything even, all right? So that's how everybody wants to be on this side of the parish. When a developer proposed a project at the time, he or she pretty much followed the same process that they do today. They go to the planning office, put in their application, pay their fees, and a yellow sign suddenly appears on that property, notifying the public that a request had been made for a change. That's when I start getting calls. I saw this yellow sign, what's this about? And then a request for a meeting, and we just kind of start talking, much like what just happened with this. But we have meeting after meeting. A short list of the neighborhoods north of I-12 developed since I've been on the council. This is not all of them, but this is a short list. Tallow Creek, Hidden Pines, Beau Arbor, Maison de Lac, Normandy Oaks, Beatico Creek, Weston Glen, Del Sol, Tuscany West, Terrabella. And Timber Branch had just finished when I first got on the council, had just been completed. Every one of these subdivisions were protested by someone who lived in the area before. Every one, every single one. I still get complaints from people who were living in those subdivisions about the fact that we're allowing too many subdivisions. And so Tallow Creek, for example, Rousseau Road, the residents on Rousseau Road were aghast. They were going to be flooded out. It was going to be the worst thing in the world. Tallow Creek itself was going to be over its banks. Timber Branch was protested by the Covington residents. We're not going to be able to get out of Covington. When we hit Highway 21, we're not going to be able to get out of Covington because all those people living in Timber Branch. So y'all are just going to inundate Highway 21. That was Timber Branch 25 years ago, maybe. Maison de Lac, here's a funny one. In the beginning, it was a retirement community, and they had a potential assisted living center there that was going to be planned. Can't remember the gentleman's name who had it. Only people 55 and over were going to be allowed to purchase in there. You should have heard the complaints about that development. There are going to be ambulances going in and out of that place all the time. I'm not making this up. This is burned in my memory. Okay. Let's see. And do we really want all those old folks coming out on Highway 1085? 55. So, yeah, that's a sad thing. It lay dormant for several years. The economy went down. It lay dormant for several years until it was purchased and redeveloped. But the initial developer had a very difficult time selling lots. One Thursday evening in this chambers right here, we had a total of 4 appeals, all in my district. They were, as I said, protested by the residents before them. They were Terrabella, Del Sol, Weston Glen, and Tuscany West. The residents were 100% against them. All right? Terrabella was going to be the scourge of the earth. 376 acres. It was going to be horrible. The number of people who yelled doom and gloom over Terrabella was amazing. We had multiple meetings, and in the end, the current residents were still against it. So it was too big. It was too much traffic. Who ever heard of a traditional neighborhood development? That will never work. Now look at it. It's beautiful. It's just jamming. It is a beautiful place. Let's discuss real quick commercial developments. Winn-Dixie. We don't need a grocery store there. We got Equistapace. We got IGA. We got Rouse's. Why do we need a grocery store there? The Winn-Dixie that stays full all the time every time you go. I hear the majority of their customers have Medicaid. I heard that. Out of that Medicaid, out of that Winn-Dixie. River Chase, if I want to go to Target, I can go to Slidell. We already have malls everywhere, no big boxes. And do we even need to discuss the Colonial Pinnacle debacle that's sitting out there right now? Most of it is blighted. A lot of it is very good and very well planned, but most of it is blighted because they were so protested and sued that the original company backed out and sold. Most of it sits idle right now. And I don't even know, I lost track of who owns it now. The Chevron on Highway 21. The Chevron, you know the shell right there, as soon as you get off the interstate, you pass, and then the shell right there on the right, there's a Chevron right next to it. People were going to die coming out of that shell. When it was protested, everyone was so worried that people were going to die going in and out of that Chevron station. I hadn't heard anybody over the last 20 years. But that's how the hysteria, and y'all have heard me say this word before, and I don't mean it in a condescending way. I mean, it just gets crazy. The stuff, it's like when I don't have an argument, I got to scare the hell out of people. So let me figure out something. I'm not answering any questions, ma'am. And then now my favorite, Keith Young's. I mean, everybody loves Keith Young's. But when it was being proposed, people said, well, why does he have to go there? Why can't he go on 190? They're going to be drunk folks coming out of there after eating and drinking and kill people on 1077. I'm not lying. I'm not making this up. So but listen to this. If the parish had blocked all of those developments because of the doom and gloom being passed around, the fear of the unknown, the rumors, a lot of you wouldn't be here because we wouldn't have your subdivision. All right? You would either be living in Mandeville or somewhere else. Rumors cause hysteria and shut down communication. I'll tell you a real quick story. Well, you can leave. I mean, I'm just going to tell my story. All right, because I got the floor. When Katrina hit, I will never forget Kevin Davis, the parish president at the time. He had a meeting at 10 in the morning and 4 in the afternoon. And he just said, y'all remember it? And he had dry erase boards up there. And he had like problems or things that we need to discuss. And over here on the right, and I thought that was real curious until I found out what it said rumors. All right, so every meeting, 2 days a week, two times a day, he would discuss the rumors that are out there. Now, why would he do that? You know, I remember they said charter wasn't going to come back. There were fires up north in Folsom. There were people being shot. So he had all those rumors listed. The reason he did that was because he had to address them and push them down before they cause hysteria, and it gets much, much bigger. This project, I've heard that there were going to be toxic chemicals. There's going to be medical waste. There's going to be emissions coming out. And they said, the one lady told me, just like in Laplace and all down there, there's just going to be emissions. No, they're not. Where the heck does that come from? But it makes good stories and it gets people fired up. So I think that's what happens, is that people get fired up when they hear that kind of stuff. And that's just not fair. It's not fair to the process. A common statement I hear is, my family came over here from Metairie or New Orleans or Metairie or Marrero, etc., to get away from development, and we came here for the trees. Well, you know where I'm getting ready to go with this, huh? My response is, there were trees where your house is. There were many trees. There were deer running around, rabbits, everything else. Many trees where you currently live. And you didn't come over here by yourself because you brought about 50,000 of your friends with you. So we have to find a place for them to live, eat, work, drive, be educated, be entertained, be cured if you have an illness. And when we do all of this, then we're the bad guys. Then it gets like this. Then I get ugly, ugly emails. I've made some decisions throughout my tenure on the council that didn't please everyone, but I thought they were sound and for the betterment of the parish, and most of the time I had to ferret out the truth from the hysteria. Oshner Boulevard, lovely road lined with trees and very substantial concrete road, 4-lane. It goes west and then north to 1085, and the extension for that road continues going west. And it's been on the books for years. This is nothing new. I mean, we've been waiting on this for a long time. It's been on at least 2010. The road is currently zoned PBC1 and PBC2. This was because back during rezoning, I had a conversation with Mr. Weiner. He wanted what everybody else wanted, and everybody else wanted HC3. which would allow big box offices. But then he said, you know what, Marty, I know, and I remember this conversation very well. I know, everybody else has got that. Let's shoot for PBC 1 or PBC 2. So that's how it got that way, and it came before the council and was voted that way. Permitted uses for PBC 2, I think we already talked about them, high-rise office and residential buildings, hotels, motels, convention centers, colleges, universities, research centers, public utility facilities, parking lots and decks, freestanding restaurants. Try putting a Hooters out there and see what everybody's going to be saying. They're going to have a fit. Mixed-use centers, including residential restaurants, well, you get the picture. So it can be a lot of things. It can be a little bitty kind of traditional neighborhood development in and of itself. It can have residents, apartments, little small restaurants and all that, all out there on that 70 acres. About Medline real quick. Medline is a multinational company providing medical supplies to healthcare facilities around the world. This company will be strictly a distribution center. I think that's been told to us. Items in and items out, much less traffic and truck traffic than if the PBC2 were to be developed. Those restaurants, those bars, everything else that can go to PBC2, don't you think they're going to have trucks to, deliver? Let's just say a Delgado campus is out there. You think how many people are going to go in and out of that place? Anyway, so let's see. This company, when built, will be hardly heard from, just as they have been across the highway. They've been there for 13 years with absolutely no issues. I'm going to go ahead and finish. I'm supporting this project for these reasons. Ochsner Boulevard and the surrounding areas are a true medical corridor, with St. Tammany Hospital and Ochsner planning a healthcare center there. It's lined with Avanti Assisted Living, Forest Manor is lined with a lot of already good medical businesses. The Medline project is not touching any residential neighborhood, and its drive is directly due south. And I like that when you hit that little circle, you go due south, and that's their main driveway. It doesn't continue on. This will provide less intense and dense development than the current zoning. I'd rather have one entity on 70 acres than 70 entities on 70 acres. The traffic would most definitely be a nightmare if we were to allow that. They will have 20-plus acres of green space and will drain their water immediately into their detention ponds, which they have already agreed to increase to 30% runoff. The next reason, the Weiner family has been good partners in the past. They have historically performed. I knew I was going to get a boo from that, but I'm going to continue on because I believe it. The Weiner family has been good partners in the past. They have historically performed in an ethical and forthright manner and have assisted the parish in building roads and other infrastructure, since the parish didn't have the money, with very little or no recognition. They own around 200-plus acres around this site. I do not believe that they would shoot themselves in the foot and contaminate the remainder of their properties out there. I don't believe it. I believe that there's a Mercedes-Benz dealership that they just developed. I do know that there might be some things that wouldn't be as palatable to the Wainers or to the neighborhood that could go there, that he could sell out real quick. And I don't think that that's going to happen. I think they know what they're doing, and they do classy things. That's my opinion, and I understand that that's not the opinion of everybody. Next reason, Parish Planning Department recommended approval, who voted, and then the commission voted 5-3 to approve. It was denied, as we said, because it wasn't. We didn't have a quorum. It's an excellent economic driver for the parish. In conclusion, the bottom line, this is a zoning issue. Drainage, wetlands, traffic studies will be addressed in the planning phase. The AML district states that it should be located in close proximity to major transportation routes, with the ideal location allowing for multimodal opportunities. It is bordered by I-12, much like you have the Budweiser dealership and others as you head down the interstate. I believe this meets the criteria, so I'd like to make a motion to override the zoning's failure to approve of this project, as amended to the 69.4 acres. So I have a motion.
We still, Marty, we still have to have the closing of each side, so wait 2 minutes on each side, okay? And then
Okay,
I'll
but
come,
that-
and I'll
that's-
come right back.
the motion's
to you.
out there.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Gotcha. And I'll get a second from it.
All right.
I'm
Michelle,
sorry.
second.
Michelle, second. Thank you,
Ms.
ma'am.
Blanchard.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Marone, would you please come up for the 2-minute closing, please? Gene? 2 minutes, brother. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would suggest to you that your decision on this project is not about one person, it's not about one property or even one company. It is about what is in the best interest of St. Tammany Parish. And not St. Tammany Parish in the hub right around this property, but from the Washington Parish line to Lake Pontchartrain, from the Tangipahoa Parish line to the Mississippi State line. That is what this is about. It is what is in the best interest of St. Tammany Parish. And to think otherwise, to think it's about one person or one property or even one company is, in my view, respectfully myopic and dangerously short-sighted. We made a decision a long time ago in St. Tammany Parish that we're not going to have economic development here that brings steel mills or smokestacks. We decided that we wanted clean business, clean economic development. I would submit to you that Medline is that exact economic development engine. We want and we need Medline, and I respectfully suggest to you that this is the appropriate location. I will say what I said in the beginning. Follow the facts and not the emotion. The staff has recommended approval. 5 of the 8 zoning commissioners who heard this case voted to approve it. I urge you to approve this case. I urge you to tell Medline that they are welcomed in St. Tammany Parish and that they are well-suited for a piece of property that is fronting I-12, that is between 2 of the major north-south corridors in western St. Tammany Parish, that we want you here and we need you here. This is the appropriate location. I hope that you will support Mr. Dean's motion that is on the floor. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Marone. Mr. Lowen.
Yes. Mr. Dean, you've heard from us talk about...
Hold on one second. There you go.
Okay.
Mr. Dean, you heard from us talk about traffic and drainage and other issues, not hysteria. It's been about facts. Those are absolutely have to be considered in a zoning ordinance. The law requires it. You've heard from your own attorney that it requires it. To consider otherwise is just a spot zoning and legal spot zoning. And we ask that you all consider that very carefully, because I think what you're doing, even if you think it's good for the parish, is picking out one particular spot, making a rule just for them, and I think it's something that's very dangerous. I'm going to yield the rest of my time.
Chairman Lorino and other council members, thank you again for your time.
Your name?
I'm sorry.
Scott Delacroix.
Thank you, Scott.
This record is full of facts, undisputed facts, not hysteria. It has facts in it of the public statements of our parish president, who opposes this site, of the governor, of our U.S. senators talking about the death trap we have on I-12 right now. This last phase of I-12 where these trucks will be entering, as we understand, is not yet funded. We've heard the talk about, oh, those are numbered roads in the parish. The parish we don't control those. Well, this seems to us, notwithstanding in 2010 this road was approved and on the plans, things change in 9 years. I think this parish, the voters are saying, we want responsible zoning. They're not sure what it is, and there may be some hysterical people, but this record is crystal clear. This record is ready to go. If we lose in this matter here, and this is not a threat, we don't think there's a rational basis that's been stated to spot zone this piece of property. Louisiana Supreme Court, rezoning on a piecemeal or spot basis is highly suspect. A city purporting to act on its police powers cannot create this.
Thank you, Scott.
And that's all in the record. Thank you.
Okay, we have, she's going to, Madam President, I think you speak after we vote. We have a motion and vote? Okay, thank you, ma'am. Thank you. We have a motion by Mr. Dean and a second by Ms. Blanchard to override the zoning decision. See no one else in the queue, please vote.
Motion passes, 12 yeas, 2 absent.
Madam President, I think you wanted to address the council? Yeah.
Would you turn my mic?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for this opportunity. If you all would just sit down and listen for one more minute, you might get some information you'd be interested in. There has been a lot of debate about this project's merits and deficiencies. At times, there's been the spirited discussion concerning the impact it will have on this community. So let me take a moment and point out that, as I have said many times, this zoning change request has had a process to go through that is laid out by law, and that process has been followed. I appreciate that both sides were heard, that each fought for what they believed was right, and I thank all those that voiced their opinion. Medline has been a good corporate citizen and employer in St. Tammany. We want them to remain in this community, and we all have had a hard decision to make tonight. However, it does remain clear to me that this project proposed site will have an adverse impact on the surrounding residents, and traffic in the area will be complicated further. These are among the many reasons these residents have been here tonight, to be heard. They have been loud and clear. As president, I will use the authority given me to veto this ordinance if it's passed. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Oh, yes. We need a motion to introduce ordinance, a motion to introduce as an ordinance. I'm sorry. Steve, Mr. Stavancic, and Mr. Dean.
Yeah, ordinance for introduction since we overturned the decision.
We have to have ordinance for introduction. Okay. Motion by Mr. Dean, second by Mr. Stavancic. Please, we don't need a vote on it.
Now go to ordinances for introduction.
Okay. Okay, thank you. We'll go to ordinance for adoption. Number 1, ordinance calendar number 6243, ordinance to amend precinct boundary legal description within the parish. Need a motion to amend. Motion to amend by Mr. Stavancic, second by Mr. Balacero. Please vote. Vote.
You walked out.
Mr. Smith?
Okay.
Motion is unanimous, 2 absent.
All righty. I need a motion to reintroduce.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Balacero, second by Mr. Toledano. No vote needed. Thank you. Ordinance calendar number 6244, ordinance amending the parish code to add new permitted cemeteries in HC-3. Ms. Blanchard. Motion to postpone by Ms. Blanchard, second by Mr. Canulette. Please vote.
Motion is unanimous, 3 absent.
Number 3, ordinance calendar number 6245, AA, ordinance to declare multiple tax adjudicated properties as surplus property to proceed with the sale of properties.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Balisaro, second by Mr. Taladano. Please vote.
Motion is unanimous, 3 absent.
Number 4, ordinance calendar number 6246, ordinance to correct the roads and drainage inventory, Ward 6, District 6. Mr. Tanner. Motion by Mr. Thompson, second by Mr. Taladano. Please vote.
Motion is unanimous, 3 absent.
Number 5, ordinance calendar number 6247, ordinance authorizing the parish president to acquire temporary construction servitude for McDonald Street Drainage Project, Ward 4, District 7.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. by Mr. Balisaro, second by Ms. O'Brien. Please vote.
That was bad.
Motion is unanimous, 3 absent.
Ordinance calendar number 6248, ordinance amending the official parish zoning map to reclassify 1 acre from 1-1 to MD-3, Ward 3, District 3. Motion by Mr. Thompson, second by Mr. Fitzgerald. Ready to go. Please vote.
Mr. Fitzgerald. Motion is unanimous, 3 absent.
Number 7, ordinance calendar number 6249, ordinance amending the official parish zoning map to reclassify 0.2349 acres from A-3 to A-3 in MHO, Ward 9, District 14. Motion by Mr. Smith, second by Ms. Blanchard. Please vote.
Mr. Dean. Motion is unanimous, 3 absent.
Ordinance calendar number 6250, ordinance amending the official parish zoning map to reclassify 0.17 acres from NC-1 to ED-1, Ward 4, District 4.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Balisaro, second by Mr. Taladano. Please vote.
Motion is unanimous, 3 absent.
Ordinance calendar number 6251, ordinance amending the official parish zoning map to reclassify 1.34 acres from A-2 and RO to A-2 RO and MHO, Ward 3, District 3. Motion by Mr. Thompson, second by Mr. Fitzgerald. Please vote.
Motion is unanimous, 3 absent.
Number 10, ordinance calendar number 6252, ordinance to correct the road and drainage inventory, Ward 6, District 6. Motion by Mr. Thompson, second by Mr. Fitzgerald. Please vote.
Motion is unanimous, 3 absent.
Number 11, ordinance calendar number 6253, ordinance accepting final subdivision into the roads and drainage inventories, Ward 6, District 6. Motion by Mr. Thompson, second by Mr. Taladano. Please vote.
Motion is unanimous, 3 absent.
Number 12, ordinance calendar number 6254, ordinance amending the official parish zoning map to reclassify 1.123 acres from NC-2 and CBF-1 to I-1, Ward 7, District 7.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Balacero, second by Mr. O'Brien. Please vote.
Motion is unanimous, 4 absent.
Ordinance calendar number 6255, ordinance amending the official parish zoning map to reclassify 0.277 acres from A-1A and RO to A-1A, MHO, and RO, Ward 2, District 2. Mr. Fitzgerald. Motion by Mr. Fitzgerald, second by Mr. Thompson. Please vote.
Motion is unanimous, 4 absent.
Ordinance calendar number 6256, ordinance amending the official parish zoning map to reclassify 5.53 acres from A-4, A-5, and HC-2 to A-4 and A-5, Ward 1, District 3. Motion by Mr. Thompson, second by Mr. Toledano. Please vote.
Mr. Fitzgerald. Motion is unanimous, 4 absent.
Number 15, ordinance calendar number 6257, ordinance amending the official parish zoning map to reclassify 1.65 acres from ND-3 medical facility. Mr. Toledano, motion by Mr. Toledano, second by Mr. Fitzgerald. Please vote.
Motion is unanimous, 4 absent.
Ordinance calendar number 6258, ordinance amending the official parish zoning map to reclassify 1 acre from A-1 and RO to A-2 RO and MHO, Ward 2, District 6. Motion by Mr. Toledano, second by Mr. Balacero. Please vote.
Mr. Toledano, push the button again. Mr. Fitzgerald. Motion is unanimous, 4 absent.
Number 17, ordinance calendar number 6259, ordinance amending the official parish zoning map to reclassify 3 acres from A-1A and RO to A-1A, RO, and MHO, Ward 3, District 2. Mr. Fitzgerald, motion by Mr. Fitzgerald, second by Mr. Thompson. Please vote.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to discuss this for a moment, too.
Yeah, go to sleep, Reagan.
Just kidding.
Mr. Dean. Motion is unanimous, 4 absent.
Number 18, ordinance calendar number 6260, ordinance amending the official parish zoning map to reclassify 4.95 acres from A-1 suburban district to A-2 suburban district, Ward 2, District 2. Motion by Mr. Fitzgerald, second by Mr. Dean. Please vote.
Motion is unanimous, 4 absent.
Ordinance calendar number 6261, ordinance correct the road and drainage inventory to include Mockingbird Loop lateral, Ward 6, District 6. Motion by Mr. Balacero, second by Mr. Stefancic. Please vote.
Motion is unanimous, 4 absent.
Number 20, ordinance calendar number 6262, ordinance to amend the 2019 operating budget amendment number 11.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Balacero, second by Mr. Toledano. Please vote.
Motion is unanimous, 4 absent.
Number 21, ordinance calendar number 6263, ordinance to revote an unopened portion of Louisa Street and portion of Rusella Avenue. Ms. O'Brien.
Heard by the, I move to postpone because it won't be heard by the Planning Commission until November 12th.
Okay, motion by Ms. O'Brien, second by Mr. Stefancic. Please vote.
To postpone, is that correct?
Mr. Dean. Motion is unanimous, 4 absent.
Okay, we'll go to discussion and other matters. Number one, motion to refer to zoning commission for recommendation to propose ordinance amending the parish code to add seven private nonprofit animal services. Mr. Fitzgerald.
So moved to refer to the zoning commission.
Motion by Mr. Fitzgerald, second by Mr. Dean. Please vote.
Motion is unanimous, 4 absent.
Number two, motion to refer to zoning commission for recommendations to purpose rezoning of 0.951 acres from A-2 to A-4 and MHO,
Yeah,
District
Carlos,
2.
speak to this one.
Mr. Fitzgerald.
So move.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second, and I think Mr. Hernandez.
Thank you. Carl Hernandez. Here to discuss something from, that's right. Okay, this is different from the previous discussions on here. This obviously has to do with the motion, and actually I can combine the two if you like, because I have the same concerns regarding number 2 and number 3. 2 is interesting that it's changing from A2 to A4, and also the manufactured home overlay. Now, and that's 0.951 acres that this change is for. But of course, and my objection, of course, is having to do with the fees that are not going to be collected here for the thing. The fees, I'm estimating that won't be collected for number 2 is $420, the fees on there. For number 3, the fees are $382 that are not going to be collected. And I guess I'm going to ask the question, not here tonight, but when the matter comes before the Finance Committee, hearing the operation fees for the parish, and obviously having to do with zoning, that why aren't we collecting these fees? And I think I'm going to talk about that at the hearing before finance and the zoning consideration as to why we're not collecting all the fees. And if these 2 fees, and I'm sure we're going to hear a reason for not these 2 fees, and they're always excellent reasons. It's amazing to me how they're always excellent reasons. But, hopefully we will consider that we won't collect these fees this time, and hopefully we'll collect all the fees in 2020, and even next month maybe we'll collect all the fees. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hernandez. Okay, we had a motion and a second. Please vote.
Motion is unanimous, 4 absent.
Number 3, motion to refer to the zoning commission for recommendation to propose rezoning of 0.57 acres from NC-4 to HC-1, Ward 8, District 12.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Balisaro, second by Mr. Toledano. Please vote.
Motion is unanimous, 4 absent.
Okay, we have an item off the floor, number 1. Yeah, I know, I gotta read it first, though. Resolution to, I need to have a motion for it to come off the floor. Motion by Mr. Toledano, second by Mr. Balisaro. Please vote.
Motion is unanimous, 4 absent.
All righty. Resolution to amend ordinance CS number 18-3977 to make change to the 2019 capital improvement budget and capital assets. Mr. Stefanczyk. Motion by Mr. Stefanczyk, second by Ms. Blanchard. Please vote.
Motion is unanimous, 4 absent.
Number 2, ordinance to amend the 2020 operating budget, Amendment 1. Mr. Stefanczyk. Motion by Mr. Fonsick, second by Mr. Toledano.
No vote.
No vote needed.
It's a motion to introduce, is it not, sir?
Yes, that's it.
It's a motion to introduce it.
Yes.
Yes.
I just didn't hear that said.
Yeah. Okay, okay.
A motion to adjourn?
A motion to adjourn by Mr. Bavasaro, second by Mr. Toledano.
Just say everybody.